Hello everyone, welcome to the paid workshop and session 4. And all of us know that today we are going to discuss on e-invoicing, place of supply, and also the intricacies in the input tax rated. But before we even begin our session, I just want to say if you are able to hear me or not. So you can just say hi on the chat box. Yeah, it seems like everyone is able to hear me. So we can like start our session. So first I will just brief you like what we are going to cover in today's session. So we'll just start with e-invoicing, and then we'll move towards the place of supply. And then another expert, which is Venugopal Gela, he's going to join us, and he will then cover the intricacies in input tax credit. And also, as we have promised like yesterday, we are also going to cover the TCS provision, which is there under the Income Tax Act. So that is the agenda of today's workshop. So with this, first of all, I just want to tell about the ClearTax offer. So right now, ClearTax is giving all-in-one tax software for CAs with flat 65% off. When we talk about, it's a bulk software, which means you have GST software, TDS software, and the income tax software together. So with this, I think we should start on the topic, which is e-invoicing. So I will just start on e-invoicing. And in case you have any doubts, you want to understand about the upcoming changes and all, you can always subscribe to ClearTax YouTube channel. You just have to go to YouTube, search ClearTax, and click on subscribe now button. And not only this, the ClearTax has also launched the employee health benefit plan for the small and medium businesses, where they will be getting the unlimited doctor consultation and health checkup discounts. Along with that, there would be a health insurance, including COVID-19 cover for employees and their families. And if you look into the premium or the installment, it's very easy monthly payment of just 149 rupees. So you can always explore more. So you can search for ClearTax health benefit plan. You will be able to get more information on that. So now let's start on today's session, which is electronic invoicing. Till now, we all are aware this electronic invoicing. This is already applicable from 1st October 2020, right? But now the thing is like we need to know more about it and what is like government future plan. So we should understand about all of this thing, because maybe today invoicing is applicable only to some people, but maybe in future it's going to cover lot of transactions, lot of people. So we should be aware about all of this thing. What's the upcoming feature, or what are the upcoming changes which is going to come from the government, so that we can plan our day for them. Now, first question which always comes to everyone's mind is who can issue our tax invoice? If we talk about the normal tax invoice, right now I'm not talking about the e-invoicing. If we look into the normal tax invoice, it needs to be issued by a registered person who is supplying the taxable goods or services, or who is receiving the taxable goods or services from the unregistered supplier. When I'm saying unregistered supplier, obviously this, if it is covered under the reverse charge, then that person has to issue a self invoice, right? So which means if I'm a seller in that particular case, if I'm supplying the taxable goods and the services, I have to issue the tax invoice. And if I'm receiving some taxable goods and services which is covered under the reverse charge from the unregistered person, then also I'm required to issue a tax invoice. What if I'm selling or I'm supplying the exempted goods? So if I'm supplying the exempted good, in that particular case, I don't issue tax invoice. Instead, I issue the bill of supply, right? So this is the normal provision of the tax invoice. And if we just go with this rule 48, right now, again, I'm not going towards the electronic invoices. We are going to cover that part. But first, we should understand that who is actually required to issue a normal invoice. So here, if we just go with this rule 48 of CGST rule 2017, which talks about manner of issuing the invoice. So it normally says that this invoice needs to be issued in triplicate One for the one is the original copy, the another which is for the recipient, then there is a duplicate copy for the transporter, and the triplicate copy for the supplier. That is how we all are required to issue the invoice. So, sorry. So if it is goods, then we have to issue the invoice in triplicate, and if it is services, then we are required to issue the invoice in duplicate, which is one the original copy for the recipient and the duplicate copy is for the supplier, because services the transporter don't need any invoice at all, because this services will never be transported. Now the question comes in, what about the serial number? Serial number we can like put it as per the financial year, which should be like unique for a one particular financial year. Now we'll go with the notification which has been issued by the CBIC. So here the first of the notification was issued on 13th December 2019. The notification number was 68/2019, where they are now talking about the electronic invoice. So what they are saying, an invoice shall be prepared by such class of registered person where they are required to get the RN number, which is invoice reference number. So they are required to get the invoice reference number, and if the invoice reference number is not there in that particular invoice, then that invoice will be considered as invalid invoice. What does this mean? See, I will also explain you like how this RN is generated and what to do. Is it like whether we have to change our ERP or is it something else? So we're going to cover all of that part. So here, if we till now what we had discussed, we have understood that you have to get one RN number which should be there in your invoice. If it is there in the invoice, in that particular case, your invoice become valid. Otherwise, it is invalid invoice. Which means the recipient, if you remember, whenever you issue an invoice, you as a supplier issue an invoice to a recipient, then this recipient, one of the condition for availing the ITC is in the possession of the tax invoice. Right? So if you go with section 16, that clearly says that there should be a possession of tax invoice. But in case this supplier, let's say he is liable to get this RN number and he is not putting that RN number in the tax invoice, which means the invoice which this recipient is going to receive will become an invalid invoice. Which means one of the condition he has not satisfied as per section 16 and he will not be able to claim the ITC. So this is not only required from the supplier perspective, but also from the recipient's perspective. Which means if I am a recipient and I am getting certain supplies from different person, I should know that whether this person, the supplier, was liable to generate the RN or not. Because accordingly, then I can see whether the invoice I am getting, is it valid or not. So this is one of the notification. We'll also understand like to whom this RN needs to be generated, because they are talking about some specified person with certain sets of conditions and restrictions. So we understand what are the conditions and what are the restrictions. So here comes your notification number 13/2020, which talks about, which notifies that who are required to generate the RN number. So here it says every registered person, other than they have separated some of the person like the goods transport agencies, the passenger transport agencies. We'll discuss what are the exceptions for now. So for now you can park aside. So they are registered person other than this whose aggregate turnover in the financial year exceed 100 crore rupees. That in respect of the supply of goods or services or both to a registered person. So if they are supplying to a registered person, so what are important things over here? There should be a registered person. Customer should be a registered person, which means we are talking about the B2B transaction. Second important point is this is in respect of the goods or services, the taxable goods and services. Then the third is the turnover. So here the turnover, or we can say the aggregate turnover which they have talked about, is exceeding 100 crore, but this limit has been changed. So this was further amended. So if we just go to the another notification which came, was notification number 61/2020, where they have increased this limit from 100 crore to 500 crore. So that is one change. And also they have put in one more exception, that special economic zone unit, they are not required to generate the RN number. Right? So this is all of the thing. So if we talk about now, so if we just aggregate or we just try to consolidate, like what are that, who are that person who are required to generate the invoice, then it's a registered person whose aggregate turnover exceed 500 goods in respect of the supply of goods or services or both to a registered person. Except for, so they are exception, I was talking about the rule 54 exception, they are this exception, which is insurer or a banking company or a financial institution including the NBFC, the goods transport agency, the passenger transport service, supply services by way of admission to exhibition or cinematographic films in multiplex screens, and SEZ unit. Right, so this was the notification. Now let's break, now let's understand one point like separately. Right, first question, like let me ask you one simple question. I talked about this iron number is required to be generated by the person who is supplying the goods and the services to the registered person. Right, let me ask you one question. What if I am supplying the goods and services to the unregistered person, which means I am making B2C supplies? Whether this B2C supplies will be covered under this e-invoicing or not? You can just reply on the chat box as yes or no. So I am getting answer as no. One user says yes. Okay. Now, is it like whether my voice is clear now or still it's breaking? Okay, so here, if we just talk about, okay, people say it's clear, but Rao says still it is breaking. Rao, can you just check your internet connection one? So when we were talking about B2C, most of the people say that you're not required to generate the IRN number, which means e-invoicing is not required for the B2C invoice, which is right. So this invoice, if we talk about the IRN number, the invoice reference number, this is required only for B2B documents. Let me ask you another question. Though here, if you look into this particular section or the notification which was issued, it talks about the supplies which has been made to a registered person. But if you look into the clarification which the government has issued, they also include the export transaction under this. Though when we talk about export transaction, that is not to a registered person, but still when we look into the practical aspects and the FAQ which is given by the GSTN, so they are also generating the IRN number for the export transaction. So that is one thing. And now if we talk about the exceptions, we have already covered, which means insurer or a banking company, even if their turnover is more than 500 crore, they are not required to generate the IRN number. In the same way, the GTA, the passenger transport services, the supplying services by way of admission or exhibition of cinematographic films, and SEZ unit. Now, my question to you, whether SEZ developers, are they required to generate the IRN number or not? If assuming their turnover exceeds 500 crore. I got the answer from one. So I'm sorry, I'm not able to see the name of the person, but I got one answer, no. What about others? Others says yes, no. Okay, I'm not getting answers from many people. I just got 4 replies. Okay. I'm getting answers no. So most of the people are saying no, but few says yes. So here, if we look into, if we talk about SCZ developer, again, as per the FAQ given by the GST, for the SCZ developer, they are still required to generate the IRN number, which means this particular exception we can talk about is only for the SCZ units. Now, let me ask you another question. What if I am a person, I am a normal supplier, and I am supplying the exempted goods, or maybe exempted services to a registered person? In that particular case, whether I am required to get this IRN number or not. Okay, I got the answer from 2 as no and 1 as yes. Another says no. Okay, so again I'm getting mix of answer. In this particular case, since I told you very clearly that this is applicable in case of tax invoice. When we look into the notification and the rule, all of this has come for the tax invoice and not for the bill of supply. And we talk about, if we talk about the exempted goods or the exempted supplies, here in respect of exempted goods or exempted services, we are required to generate the bill of supply and not the tax invoice. Since we are required to generate the bill of supply, this electronic iron number, we can talk about electronic invoicing, or the iron is not required in respect of the bill of supply, which means it is not required in case of the exempted or the exempted supplies. My next question to all of you is, for example, though if you look into the legal aspect, it is clearly mentioned that whenever you are supplying to a registered dealer, you have to issue a taxable invoice, or we can talk about tax invoice for the taxable goods and services separately, and bill of supply for the exempted goods or services. But if you look into practical aspects, what usually happens, sometimes we issue a single invoice, single tax invoice in case of both the taxable and the exempt supply. Now my question to all of you is whether I am required to generate the iron in this particular case. Okay, everyone says yes, which is right. So in this particular case, we are required to generate the iron number. Why? Because it also includes your taxable supplies. So here what we have to do, in case of taxable supply, you can put the respective rate. In case of exempt supplies, you can put this under the tax rate as 0%. Right? This is how you have to show this invoice while you are generating the iron number. Now my question to another question to all of you is, let's say I have my GSTN, I have my three GSTN. One is in the state of Karnataka, another is in Delhi, and third is in Uttarakhand. Now my question to you, in Uttarakhand, when I was looking into my total turnover, the turnover was let's say 400 crore. Now looking into the second state, in the like in Delhi, if I talk about, so Delhi I have a turnover of around 150 crore. And when I look into my third state, Karnataka, there my turnover is 100 crore. My question to all of you again is whether I am required to generate the iron, whether invoicing is applicable to me or not. Great. Everyone says yes, and which is absolutely right, because here they are using the word aggregate turnover. And if we talk about what exact aggregate turnover means, aggregate turnover means the value of all taxable supplies, excluding your inward supply liable to RCM, so that needs to be removed, plus your exempted supplies, plus your export of goods or services, plus your interstate supplies of persons having the same permanent account number. So you have to check the turnover at the PAN level and not at the GST level. So if your turnover exceed 500 crore at a PAN level, then this iron needs to be generated for all of your GSTs, right? So that is how we have to compute. But it will not include your taxes like central tax, state tax, union territory, and indeed. So whatever the taxes covered under GST, that will not be included while you are computing for the aggregate turnover. Right? Now my question to you, again another question. What if let's say I have one branch, and I just have one branch, I don't have many branches, and I have one branch in the state of Karnataka. There I am just dealing with the exempted supplies. I don't have a taxable supply at all. In that particular case, and let's say it exceeds 500 crore, whether I am required to generate the invoicing or not. Okay, so I'm getting mix of answers here. So here, if we just talk about this particular thing, so first question comes in ki that person, whether they are registered under GST or not. Because the thing is, if that person is supplying only the exempted goods or supplies, ideally that person will not even get registered under GST. But if that person has registered under the GST, in that particular case, he has to register for e-invoicing, but he don't have to generate the iron, because when we look into the transaction, he will only have the bill of supply. and the person will not have the tax invoice. So he is not required to generate the IRN number, but he has to register for the IRN or the invoice portal. So he also has to register on the e-invoicing portal. Right. So now if we just look into how are we required to generate the IRN number. So here there is a seller, there is a portal which is an IRP portal, which is also known as invoice registration portal. So what we'll do, we will normally, as we do it today, we will generate the invoice, the normal document as we do it today. Then we have to send the payload, which is in a form of JSON, to the IRP. Then this IRP, since they will just validate whether this number is correct or not, whether it's a unique number, whether the information which is mentioned in this is right or not. So they're going to run their own validations. After they run their validations, they will see if everything is perfect. They will send you the response, and that response will have the IRN number, which is a unique number for you. That IRN number consists of your invoice number, your GST number, along with the financial year plus the document type. So it consists of this 4 parameter. This will be clubbed, and you will be getting the IRN number with you. Along with this, you will also get a QR code. So that QR code you can print in your invoice if you want to send a hard copy, or if you're sending a soft copy, you can just put it over there and send the soft copy to the customer. After you get the IRN, your work is done. But this, if you look into the IRP, what they're going to do, they're going to send the same information to the GSTN portal. Right now it is not active, but soon they will come up with that. So they will soon send this information to the GSTN portal, by which your GSTR1 will be automatically prepared. And if you have also sent the e-waybill information like transportation detail and all, in that particular case, they will also send the same information to the e-waybill portal, and in response, you will also get the Part A or Part B basis the information which you have sent. So this is how this flow will work. So here, what is the need of this? First thing, right now, if you look into, there's a duplication of work. And how is the duplication of work? For the invoice, I'm normally generating the invoice. Then for the purchase invoice currently, because they have the different formats and all that. If they have different formats and all, so in that particular case, it's very difficult for me to consume that invoices. I always have to type in. So after this becomes centralized, maybe in the future, we will just consume this JSON file and my work is done. I don't have to keep on punching my purchase document. That is one need. Second need is like have a track of all of these transactions. So if the seller is reporting this on the timely basis, which means on daily basis, then this fake invoices and the problem which government is facing right now, that will be reduced. Then other than this, from the person or from the client perspective, we look into, right now, it's like if for e-waybill, they have to go separately, punch in all information. For GST, again, they have to punch in the same information twice. And again, when we have to send it to the recipient, maybe we have to share that invoice separately. So there is like lot of, we can say, work which is to be done by the supplier. While they have to file e-waybill, while they have to file the GSTR1, or maybe sending information to the recipient, or maybe sending the same information to the banks. So there are a lot of work. To reduce this work, they have come up with the concept of this invoicing. And not only this, they also wants to see like whether this recipient, are they claiming the ITC correctly or not. So here, since this is like a real-time basis, so here as the supplier uploads or gets the IR number, the other party will be able to see the invoice in their GSTR2A. Right? So now this was about the why it was required. Now if we just talk about, I know there is one person who is asking, can the details be amended? So no, the details cannot be amended if we talk about the e-invoicing, but you have an option to cancel it. So there is a time period given to you, that is 48 hours. So within 48 hours, you can cancel the IRN number which has been generated by you. But keep in mind, like once you have generated, you cannot use the same invoice number. So once the IRN has been cancelled by you, in that case, you cannot use the same invoice number and you have to use the different invoice number. Or the second way with you, let's say now 48 hours has been lapsed. What to do in that particular case? So in that particular case, if 48 hours has been lapsed, then in that particular case, you can actually issue a credit note and generate the IRN against same, so that the value gets nullified. Now, if we look into what are the modes for generating the IRN number, that is web-based, you have API-based, there is SMS-based, mobile app-based, offline tool-based, and the GSP-based. So these are the different modes from which you can actually generate the IRN number. So if you look into APIs, like for example, you can directly integrate with the government, the NIC APIs, where from your portal itself you can generate the IRN number. But if you want to take a help from GSPs and ASP, so like ClearTax also provides the solution for the e-invoicing, where you can just integrate with them. They will make sure to integrate with your ERPs, and then you just have to click on generate the invoice on your portal, which is whatever the ERP you are using, and automatically you will get the IRN number. Not only this, there are other benefits like custom members and all. If you have certain small branches where you don't have a bigger enterprise or centralized ERPs, there also you can always use them and you can generate your IRN number. Now, if we just look into especially the takeaways, if it is required for the B2B transaction, it is required even for the supplies you have made from the e-commerce operators. But remember, this is only for the B2B transaction and not for the B2C transaction. Now, other than this, the reverse charge transactions are also covered, but this is your outward supply and not the inward supply. If it's an inward supply which was liable to RCM, in that case, you are not required to generate the IRN number. You are required to generate the IRN number only in case of your outward supplies, which was covered under the reverse charge. Then if we talk about the documents, so invoice, credit note, and debit notes are covered. If you look into ISD, ISD has also been now excluded. Earlier in the earlier days, it was written that it was included, but now you don't even have to generate the IRN for the ISD invoices or the ISD CDNs. Again, if you look into delivery challan, bill of supply, and job work, for that you are not required to generate the IRN number, right? And this IRN is mandatory for each and every invoices, and that needs to be generated for the IRP only. Again, they will do the checks, the deduplication checks, and all of this will be there. And there is no option. If you look into this, this data will not be saved on the IRP, so you won't be able to see. If you want to see on the government portal, you have to save this information on your portal itself. And here we also have to generate the QR code that needs to be generated on every invoice. And there was a schema where the government has given up with certain mandatory fees and certain optional fees. So that's a detailed schema. If you want to understand about the schema also, we already have one video on understanding the schema. I can just share that video separately with you so that you can understand all of this detail, all of this information in detail. Right, so this was about the general part of e-invoicing. We have covered all of this thing. There is schema. When we talk about schema, how we read it, we always have to see what are the mandatory field. If it's mandatory, you have to send this information. If it is optional, then you don't have to send this information to the portal. But if you feel like no, you want to send, you can always do that. So till now we just have covered the e-invoicing part. So hope this particular topic you are able to understand it. Now the question also comes in, what are the future plans for the government in respect of e-invoicing? Till now the limit, if you look into the limit, here it was exceeding 500 crore. Now what government is planning is from 1st January, from 1st Jan 2020, they're going to reduce this limit to 100 crore. So that is the first plan which they're coming up with. And then from 1st April, they will make mandatory for every person who have the B2B invoice to generate the IRN number. So that is what they are planning. And soon you will see that this become the live info. Now maybe first let's cover all the FAQ or maybe queries which you have in respect of e-invoicing. So you can put your queries on the chat box so that we can cover all the maybe queries whatever you have in relation to e-invoicing. Okay, I didn't got any query. So everything is clear. Great. Okay, let me then ask you some few questions. because I have already explained you, so I want to understand from you if you are able to understand these points or not. What about, let's say I'm a normal business and I have my purchases, but that purchases I have to generate the self invoice. Whether I'm required to generate the iron in case of the self invoice, yes or no? I got the answer from one user who says no. What about others? No. Okay. Other also says no. Great. Everyone says no, which is that we are required to generate this invoice only in respect of the outward supplies and not the inward supplies. Now, next question to you is, what about B2C large? I have certain documents where my invoice value was more than 250,000 and it was an interstate transaction. Whether I am required to generate the iron in that case or not. Great. Everyone says no, which is right, that you are not required to generate the iron number in case of the B2C large document. What about exports? Whether I am required to generate the iron for the export transactions. Everyone says yes, which is right. So I think everyone is able to understand the concept of the e-invoicing and how to generate it. We have to normally, as we do it today, we have to just generate a normal invoice in our ERP, then send the payload to the IRP. And after we send the payload, we'll get the iron number. That iron number we have to save in our invoice along with the QR code, and we are done. So that is how we have to do. If you want to know like whether my suppliers are covered under this or not, whether they are required to generate iron or not, so the government has already come up with the information where you can actually, so if we just look into this, the government has already come up with the tracker where you can see whether your particular supplier are required to generate the iron or not. So I've also sent the link on the chat box, so you can also see that link. So where they talk about, from here you can check whether the suppliers are covered under the e-invoicing or not. Right. Now let's go to the another topic. Today's second topic, which is about the place of supply. So yesterday we have covered some part of place of supply. If we just see that, which was more about section number 30, where when we were talking about the import and export transaction. But let's today discuss in detail. We will also touch upon section 13 also, okay? But we will be covering like one by one. So today we are going to cover about these topics under the place of supply. So here, if we see, first question always comes to our mind is why? Why we need this place of supply, right? So in this particular case, if we know that if your location of the supplier and the place of supply are in the same state, then you have to levy CGST and SGST. And when your location of the supplier and place of supply is in different state, in that particular case, you are required to levy the IGST. And in case of exports and import, that is always, it is deemed that it's an interstate and you are required to levy IGST. That's the reason we should know what kind of a taxes you are required to levy. So here there are certain definitions which you should understand, because while we go into the place of supply provisions, this will be something which will be required, right? So one of the definition you should know is the location of the recipient of services. So when we talk about the location of the recipient of services, so if the person has already registered, then that location of such business will become will become the location of the recipient. If they have certain fixed establishment elsewhere, then the location of that fixed establishment. And if they have more than one establishment, whether the place of business or it's a fixed establishment, then whichever is directly concerned with the receipt of the supply. And in case we don't know about it, then user place of resident of the recipient will become the location of the recipient. In the same way, if we talk about what is the location of the supplier of services, if that person is registered, then his registered place. If that person has a fixed establishment, then that fixed establishment. If it is linked to more You can talk about the more establishment, then whatever is directly linked to that supplies. And if we don't know about that, then the usual place of resident of the usual place of resident of that supplier will become the location of the supplier. If we know, if you want to understand what is the fixed establishment, so here is a place other than the registered place of business which is characterized by sufficient degree of permanence and suitable structure in terms of human and technical resources to supply services or to receive or use services for its own needs. So where we feel that there is a sufficient degree of permanence, that becomes your fixed establishment, right? Now see, to understand this and also to remember the things, because when we look into the place of supply, this is also very important for us to know, like first the provision, understand that in detail, but also we should remember like what is for what, so that it always strikes into our mind. So we have just divided this into three categories. One is your domestic supply of goods, the another is domestic supply of services, and third is your international transition. When I'm talking about the domestic supply of goods, it means when your service recipient and provider, they are in India. When I'm talking about domestic supply of services, which means recipient and provider in India. And whenever I'm talking about international transaction, it means either of your provider, the service provider or the recipient, or is in outside India. Now, first we are going to cover about the domestic place of supply of for goods. So here, this section number 10 of IGST Act 2017, this talks about the domestic place of supply of goods, right? So this has been, so here just to understand, just to remember, I've just divided this into four parts. One is basis the movement. Second, whether the third party or intermediary is present. Third is installation at the site. And fourth one is supply on a conveyance, right? So we have just divided into four parts. So if we talk about supply, so we'll cover like one by one what exact this means. If we talk about supply, which involves movement of goods, which is covered under section number 1, subsection number A. So if it is covered under the movement of goods, which means any supply which requires a movement of goods, then your place of supply will become the place where the movement terminates for delivery to the recipient. When the recipient actually gets that good, that becomes your place of supply. That does not matter, that does not matter like whether this movement is required by the supplier or the recipient or by any other person. It only means that it involves the movement of goods. It could be by supply, it could be by recipient or by any other person. So here, whenever the supply involves the movement of goods, your place of supply will become the place where it terminates for delivery to recipient. We'll understand with the help of example. Let's say there was one manufacturer A, who was in Karnataka, who sends goods to B, and B is situated in Maharashtra, which is in Mumbai, right? Now, if we look into this, what would be the place of supply in this case? Where the goods terminate for the delivery to the recipient, and where it actually terminate in the state of Maharashtra. So here your place of supply will become Maharashtra, right? Now the second example could be like, let's say the shop was in Delhi and the customer, he is in Mumbai. But what this customer is doing, customer came to Delhi, took some good, and then again went to Mumbai and then actually used the goods. In this particular case, again your movement of the goods happened, though this movement of good did not happen by the supplier but by the recipient, but this movement is happened, which means again your place of supply in this particular case will become Mumbai. Now if we talk about the second part, which was no movement of goods. So if there is no movement of goods involved, in that case your location of goods will be at the time of delivery to the recipient. So the whatever the location of the goods is at the time of delivery to the recipient, that will becomes your place of supply. One of the example, let's say there is Mr. A, who is in New Delhi and he has leased his machine costing rupees 8 lakh rupees to Mr. B, who was in Noida, Uttar Pradesh. right, for some production of goods, and he was actually paying some rent of 40,000. Now after 14 months, this Mr. B, who was right now who was having that machine, he requested Mr. A, why don't you just sell me this particular machine for rupees 4 lakh? And Mr. A say, okay, I don't have a problem, just give me 4 lakh rupees, you can take this machine with you. Right now this machine is with Mr. B. So this machine is with Mr. B. So here we don't require any movement at all. Since we don't require the movement, so what would be your place of supply in this case? Where this machine is present, which means the Noida. That is how we have to compute the place of supply, where there is no movement of goods is required. Now your third point is the third party or the intermediary. What does this mean? Usually we see bill to ship to situation. So this is like a bill to ship to situation. So here your the place of supply is always the principal place of business of this third party. I will give you one example. Let's say there is one Mr. A, right? There is one Mr. B, and then there is Mr. C, right? There are three persons involved. Mr. A, he is in Delhi. Mr. B, the Mr. B is in Maharashtra, right? And Mr. C is also in the state of Maharashtra. Okay. What happens? Mr. A, since he was in Delhi, he is an actual, if we talk about, he is an actual supplier, right? Now the Mr. B, who was in Maharashtra, and Mr. C is also in Maharashtra, Mr. B asks Mr. A, can you deliver some goods to Mr. C? Right? Mr. B is giving the instruction to Mr. A to deliver the goods to Mr. C. So in this particular case, the goods are actually delivered to Mr. C location, right? But if we look into this particular transaction, who is going to give me the money? Money will be given by Mr. B because he is the actual recipient. So here if you look into this transaction, here your place of supply will be the place of the supply of the third party who is giving the direction. So in this case, the direction have been given by Mr. B. So my place of supply will become the place of supply of the Mr. B location. That's a different thing, that this Mr. B is actually going to issue a separate invoice to Mr. C. That will also happen. But if we look into this entire transaction in case of bill to ship to situation, my billing address will always become my place of supply and not the shipping address. Hope this is clear. So if we look into this, there is a supply A in New Delhi, and then there is a, this is a different example, that there is a recipient C in New Delhi, and the third party who is giving the instruction, who was in Haryana, that person gives an instruction to supplier A to deliver the goods to recipient C. So here your place of supply will become the place of supply of the third person who is giving the instruction, which means where the supplier is going to bill. Though he is shipping to recipient, but he is going to bill to Haryana. So in this particular case, your place of supply will become Haryana. Right? So this is the same example. Then the another one is your installation at site. If we talk about installation at site, which is as per section 10, subsection 1, subsection D, here it says your place of supply will be the place of installation or sampling. So if we understand with an example, let's say there is one manufacturer A who is in Karnataka, who installs one machine for the B factory which is in Delhi. Though if we look into the recipient, the customer was in the state Maharashtra. So, but he owes one Delhi one machine. Sorry, he owes one factory in the Delhi. So in this particular case, since the supplier is going to install this machine in Delhi, so your place of supply will become Delhi. Right? Then the fifth point over here is supply on conveyance. What does the supply on conveyance means? Just think. Let's say you have onboarded on a flight. You want to go from, let's say you want to go from Delhi to Karnataka. Right? You want to go from Delhi to Karnataka. Now, what happened in between when you are going from Delhi to Karnataka? You are going to consume some goods, and you are on the flight. And there you call to a air hostess and you ask, hey, can you please give me a cup of coffee? And you consume that. Now question comes, like, because if you're talking about that coffee or whatever you have consumed, so what would be the place of supply of that particular thing? So if you look into this, so this coffee, this would be onboarded. There would be a supplier of this coffee, and this supplier would have given this good to the flight at one particular point, right? So here, when this supplier has onboarded this good to the conveyance, so let's say supplier has onboarded this in Delhi. So all these goods has been gone to this particular flight in Delhi. So here the place of supply for the supplier of that coffee will become Delhi, right? So wherever the goods has been taken on board, right? So if we now talk about, so we have just covered. So if we talk about the one of the example, this is the plane takes off from Karnataka, and the airline says merchandise to customer on board. And let's say I was a person, I consume some good in Mumbai, and the plane lands in Delhi. So here your place of supply will become Karnataka, right? So till now we have just covered our section 10, right? So we have covered section 10, which talks about domestic, like especially that we can talk about domestic place of supply of goods. That is what we have covered. If we just summarize this, it clearly says if there is a movement, then location where the terminates for delivery to goods. If there is no movement, then it's a location of the good at the time of delivery to the recipient. If there's a third party or the intermediary involved, then it's a billing address. If it's an installation at site, then place of installation. And if it's a supply on a conveyance, then place at which it's taken on board, जहाँ से वो चढ़ा है. तो अगर हमने पूरा भी जब समराइज करेंगे, अभी हमने क्या बात करी, हमने सेक्शन 10 की बात करी, और सेक्शन 10 में हमने क्या क्या चीजें कवर करी. हमने कहा अगर गुड्स का मूवमेंट होता है तो जहाँ पे वो गुड पहुंचा है, राइट, उसको हम बोलते हैं प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई. और अगर मूवमेंट पॉसिबल नहीं है, मूवमेंट नहीं हो सकता, तो जहाँ पे हमने वो गुड्स अपने रिसिपिएंट को दे दिया, दैट विल बिकम योर प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई. अगर वहां कहीं इंस्टॉलेशन की जरूरत है, लेट्स से मेरे को बहुत बड़ी क्रेन है, मुझे वो इंस्टॉल करनी है किस जगह पे, सो आई कांट डू, मैं ऐसे कहीं नहीं कर सकती, राइट? मुझे सारा सामान लेके जाना पड़ा इन द सेमिन ऑफ गुड्स, एंड देन उसको ले आके मैंने क्या किया, उसको सारा ढंग से लगा दिया. तो उसको उस जगह पे मेरी प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई क्या होगी, जहाँ पे वो इंस्टॉल्ड हुआ है, राइट? दैट विल बिकम माई प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई. एंड अगर मैं बात करूँ सप्लाई ऑन कन्वेंस, जैसे मेरी एक फ्लाइट थी, और फ्लाइट उस केस में जो एक सप्लायर था, सप्लायर ने क्या किया, जितना भी गुड्स था, अब वहाँ पे चिप्स वगैरह सब कुछ मुझे मिलेंगे, मैं पैसेंजर हूँ, पैसेंजर को तो सारे गुड्स मिलेंगे फ्लाइट के ऊपर, बट वो जो एक सप्लायर था जिसने ये सारे जो पैकेट्स हैं, चिप्स वगैरह जो भी है, वो इस फ्लाइट में जब चढ़ाए थे, वो उसकी प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई बन जाएगी, क्योंकि सप्लायर को भी यहाँ बिल इश्यू करना पड़ेगा, तो उस सप्लायर के लिए जो इनवॉइस इश्यू करेगा, तो प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई क्या बनेगी, जहां से वो गुड्स उस फ्लाइट के ऊपर चढ़ रहे हैं. तो अगर मेरी फ्लाइट दिल्ली टू कर्नाटका है, तो दिल्ली विल बिकम द प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई फॉर दैट सप्लायर, राइट? सो अभी तक हमने क्या पढ़ा, सेक्शन 10 ऑफ IGST एक्ट 2017, जहां हमने बात की थी डोमेस्टिक प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई ऑफ गुड. सो अभी तक इस पॉइंट तक आर वी ऑल क्लियर, या कोई भी डाउट है किसी को भी? I just got the reply for one person who says clear. What about others? Do we have any doubt? Great, everyone says it's clear now. Okay, so now we can just move to the second section of our IGST Act 2017, which is section number 11, which talks about the place of supply of goods for exports and import. Remember, when we were talking about section number 10, we were talking about domestic supply of goods. First thing, it's the goods, and obviously within India itself, right? Now we are talking about the export and import, again for goods, but it's an export and import. So here, if we talk about when the goods are coming from outside India to India, which is imports. In case of import of goods, the place of supply will become the place of importer. And if we talk about export, which means goods are going from India to outside India, then the place of supply will become the location of the exporter outside India. This point we have also covered yesterday. So this was very clear. I can actually, if we take an example, let's say there was a person XYZ Limited from who was in USA, and I was situated in Delta, So my company name is Delta India and I was located in Noida. In this particular case, let's say I have imported some goods from XYZ Limited, which is in USA. So in this particular case, what will be the location of the, or sorry, what would be the place of supply? Yeah, so in this particular case, our place of supply will become Noida, which is the location of the importer. If we look into export, so let's say I am Adidas and I am in India. I have exported some goods to Polo, which is in USA. So in this particular case, what would be the place of supply? Since this is an export of the goods, in that particular case, the place of supply will be of an exporter, which is in USA. So my place of supply will become USA. So this is our section number 11. So this is section number 11 of IGST Act 2017. Now we'll move towards services. Till now we have just covered the goods, the domestic as well as the international, which means the imports and exports. Now we are going to cover about the services. So when we talk about the services, again I am going to divide this into two parts, the domestic and the international. When I talk about the domestic, it means both of my supplier as well as the recipient are in India. When my both supplier and the recipient are in India, that time we apply our section number 12. So here, if first there is a general rule. So there is some specific list. If it is not covered in that specific list, then we have to apply this general rule, which says it's an hybrid rule. When I'm saying hybrid rule, remember I'm going to talk about that there is a registered person and then there is a non-registered person. If it is supplied to a registered person, then the address of the registered person, and if it is supplied to the non-registered person, then what will happen? So then in that particular case, we have to see if whether the address is in record or not. If the address is in record, we'll take that. If it is not, then place of supplier of services will become your place of supply, right? So how we have to read? If we look into now the general rule, it talks about if supplied to a registered person, the location of that person. If it is supplied to the unregistered person, in that case we have to see whether we have the address of that unregistered person. If we have that address, then address of the unregistered person, and if we don't have the address, then the supplier location will become the place of supply. So this is the general rule. Now we'll move towards the specific rule. So this will be applied when we are not covered under the specific rule. So here, just to understand, just to remember, we have just divided the specific rule into the further 6 categories. One is in relation to the immovable property. Second is in relation to the events. Third is in relation to transportation. Fourth is in relation to restaurant, catering, fitness and health. Then the next one related to training and appraisal, and the next one is telecommunication services, right? So now if we just look into this, what will happen? First we'll go to the immovable property. If we talk about the immovable property or a boat or vessel, which is covered under section 12 subsection 3, so whatever is directly related to the immovable property, such as your architect services or interior or estate agents, loading accommodations, or maybe accommodation services in immovable property for organizing some functions like wedding, religious, business function, or grant of right to use such property, or maybe construction or any services which is related to any of this, that is covered under the immovable property, right? So in this particular case, if we talk about what would be the place of supply, so here the place of supply in case of immovable property is the location or intended location of this immovable property. Wherever this property is situated, that will become your place of supply. But what if this location, let's say service here, because when we talk about the section 12, here the service recipient is also in India and the service provider is also in India, both are in India. But let's say this immovable property is outside India, then what will happen? Should they make the place of supply outside India? They are not going to do that. So what they say, whenever the immovable property is outside India, in that particular case, your place of supply will become the place of the recipient. The location of the recipient will become your place of supply. And if it is related to more properties, in that particular case, the place of supply needs to be attributed to all of that property, right? So that is what we talk about the immovable property. So let's understand this with the help of an example. Till now, let's say what is happening. I am a normal person, and I'm into business. And when I'm into the business, I am in the state of Karnataka. So when I'm in the state of Karnataka, I visited to one of the we can say there's a hotel in Delhi. I visited there, I stayed there. Now what happened, I have my GSTN in the state of Karnataka, and then there is a supplier who has this hotel in the Delhi. Now this person who is in Delhi, this hotelier, he is required to raise an invoice. I said that my GSTN is of the Karnataka. My question to all of you is that in this particular case, what are you going to charge, especially as a supplier? This hotelier, will he charge CGST or SGST, or is he going to charge IGST? So what would be the place of supply and what he's going to charge? I just got the reply for one person who says it's CGST, SGST, other says IGST, and then one says CGST, SGST. What about others? Okay, so in this particular case, if we look into the place of supply, what we have understood that in case of immovable property, your place of supply will become the place where this immovable property is situated. So this is in the state of Delhi. So Delhi will become my place of supply, and if we talk about the supplier of the services, he is also in Delhi. Since both are in the same state, then it will become intra-state transaction, which means if we have to levy CGST and HGST. Right. So now if we just move to our second list, which is event related list. If we talk about the event, we can just divide this into two parts. One is in relation to admission to an event, and the second in relation to organizing an event. When I'm talking about organizing, it could be in relation to cultural or artistic or sporting, so or any services which is related to this. So here, if we talk about admission to an event, which means like an entry fees. Let's say in Delhi, there's a Delhi tourism, and they have organized some event in Delhi Heart, right? And in Delhi Heart, whenever you enter, you have to pay some fees. Let's say the nominal amount, they charge you 50 rupees. So in this particular case, when we talk about admission of the event, your place of supply will always be the place where this event is happening, right? So if we just look into the admission to an event, your place of supply will be the location where your event is held. So what we have done, so here let's say you visited there, so this person who have organized, so who is actually charging this amount from you for this event, so here this person is going to actually charge CGST and SGST, right? Now when we move towards the next one, that is in relation to organizing an event. See, the event needs to be, let's say ki I want to, if I talked about this Delhi Hard, or maybe let's say there's a Dance India dance. So Dance India dance, they have organized one event in Delhi, and when they were organizing, they need like lot of dancers, they need lot of person over there, the musician and everyone. Now question comes over here is, so here this Dance India dance, when we talk about this, so this person, the supplier, is going to organize an event, and I am a company, let's say, and I said, okay, I'm going to sponsor. I'm going to sponsor here in this particular event, right? I'm going to pay you 1 lakh for this event. So right. So in this particular case, we have to apply our hybrid rule. And what was that hybrid rule? It was very clear. If it's a register in that particular, so wherever we have to divide between registered and unregistered, that becomes my hybrid rule. So if that services has been provided to the registered person, in my example, I am a company. Let's say I'm ClearTex and I am in the state of Karnataka, and this event has been organized by Dance India Dance in Delhi, and I said I'm going to sponsor here, and I'm going to pay you 1 lakh rupees. So when this services has been provided to this registered person, in this particular case, the place of supply will become the location of this recipient. And what is the location of the recipient? It is in Karnataka. And if it is to the non-registered person, in that particular case, the place of supply will become the location where the event is held, which means in Delhi. So let's say if me as a normal person, I'm not a company, I just visited there, okay, let me go and see this Dance India dance show. In that particular case, my the especially the even if we talk about the especially for them, they are going to charge CGST and HGST because the supplier over here is in Delhi. And if you look into the place of supply, that will become the location where the event is happening, which will be the place, which will be specially Delhi. Okay, so till now we have covered about the event wala part, where we have divided into two parts, the admission and the organizing. If we talk about admission, it's very clear, wherever the event is happening, that becomes your place of supply. When we talk about organizing, in that particular case, if you're providing to the registered recipient, then its place will become the place of supply. And whenever we are providing to the unregistered person, in that particular case, your event place will become your place of supply. Now the next category is transportation related, which is covered under our section 12 subsection 8, 12 subsection 9 and 12 subsection 10. So here whenever I'm saying hybrid role, which means there is the concept of registered recipient and the unregistered recipient. So first we are going to cover transportation of goods. When we talk about transportation of goods, here if you are providing to the registered recipient, if it is provided to the registered recipient, your place of supply will become the location of the recipient. And if it is provided to the non-registered recipient, in that case, your location will become the place where the goods have been handed for the transportation. Let's take one example. Let's say there is one company, and let's say Reliance wants to supply certain goods. Reliance, let's say it is registered in the state of Maharashtra, it is the supplier. And this Reliance wants to transport some goods to Bangalore. So it's in Maharashtra, it wants to supply some goods to Bangalore, and in Bangalore there is one another company which is also registered, let's say ABC Limited. So when this Reliance has to transport some services, so here what Reliance is doing, he is transporting some goods. Along with that goods, this person, the Reliance, they also give the, or they also charge from freight, right? So they also say, okay, I'm also going to transport some services along with this, because there is a transportation cost involved. So in this particular case, since this is a service, so in this particular, and it's the transportation of goods, and the person who is in the state of Karnataka is registered, so the place of supply will become the location of recipient, which is in the state of Karnataka. And if it is the services which has been provided some other person who is not even registered, then in that case also the place of supply will become Karnataka, because the goods has been handed over to that person in the state of Karnataka, right? The next one is transportation of passenger. And if we talk about the transportation of passenger, again this is hybrid rule, which means if it is provided to the registered person, then the location of recipient. Then if it is to the non-registered person, then the location where it embarks on conveyance. And when we talk about embark, मतलब जहाँ से वो चढ़ा था, तो जहाँ भी वो चढ़ा था उसको हम बोलते हैं place of supply. So one more important thing we should always remember about the transportation of goods. So here, if this transportation of goods this happened outside India, in that particular case your hybrid rule will not be applicable, and your place of supply will always become the place of destination of such good. So that is one thing we should all remember. Now the next one is about the third category, because we have talked about transportation of goods, transportation of passenger. The third is services on board a conveyance. And if we talk about the service on board a conveyance, in that case it will be the place of first scheduled departure. Let's say I want to go to Karnataka. I have taken a flight from Delhi to Karnataka. When I've taken a flight from Delhi to Karnataka, there I have just awaited. So I want to do some massage, and also I took an help from air hostess. And that person had actually given me some services over there. So in that, and they have charged some extra amount for that. So in this particular case, from where I onboarded that flight, which is Delhi, that will become the place of supply. So till now we have covered some transportation related services. Now we are going to cover the restaurant, catering, or the fitness or the health related services, which is mainly, if we talk about this, this is again covered under section 12, subsection number 4, which talks about, so here if we talk about the restaurant or the catering services, or maybe personal grooming or fitness or beauty treatment or some health services, in all of this case, your place of supply will be the location where the services are actually performed. So wherever the services are actually performed, that will become the place of supply. For example, let's say there is one hotel, let's say there is McD, and you went to a McD, you had the burger and all. In that particular case, what will be the place of supply? The place will be where this has been actually performed, and where is actually performed, where this McD is situated. Wherever the McD is situated, that will become the place of supply, right? Then apart from that, there is training and appraisal services. If we talk about training, so here again our hybrid rule will be applicable, which means if it is to the registered person, then the location of the registered recipient, and if it is to the non-registered person, then the location will be where services is actually performed. Let's take an example for this particular case. When we talk about the training, right, let's say I have been hired by one of the company and I'm a normal supplier here. I have been hired by ClearTex, and ClearTex says ki, okay, can you just come to our office and provide the training to all of our employees, right? So they asked me these services. I like, okay, no problem, I can come to your office and can provide the training to all of your employees. So in this particular case, ClearTex is a company that is registered, and that is registered in Karnataka. If I talk about me, let's say I am in the state of Delhi, right? So if now I'm going to provide these services, here in this example, if we talk about what is place of supply, the place of supply will be the place where ClearTex is registered, which is in the state of Karnataka, right? Because I'm going to go there and provide the training, and that person is registered in the state of Karnataka. But let's say now ClearTex is not registered at all. This was one of the normal, maybe an individual, or they said, okay, can you provide, I am not registered under GST because I was not liable to. So can you come and now provide the same training to my employees? I like, no problem, I can do that. So here in the second example, if I'm going there and providing the services, then my place of supply again will become Karnataka, because the services has been actually performed by me in the state of Karnataka. So if that's the case, then the place of supply will become Karnataka. The next is your telecommunication related services. So here if we talk about the telecommunication services, so if it's related to fixed telecom lines or lease circuits or internet lease circuit or cable, so wherever it is actually installed, that will become your place of supply. And if we talk about the postpaid connections, so usually we have the connections and all. If it's a postpaid connection, then the billing address of the recipient on the record of the supply will become the place of supply. As a prepaid connection, in that particular case, the address of the selling agent or the place where the payment has actually been received or the voucher is being sold will become your place of supply. And if we talk about the banking services, so banking services may again, the place of supply is the location of the recipient of the services on the record of the bank. So whatever the address I have given, that will become their place of supply. And if they don't have my address at all, then the location of supply will become the place of supply. And if we talk about insurance services, if it is to the registered person, then its location, and if it is to the other than registered person, then the location of the recipient of services. Now let me give you one example. Let's say there's a company called National Health Insurance Company. Now there was a ClearTex. Now what happens? There's a National Health Insurance Company and ClearTex. ClearTex avails the services from this National Health Insurance and says, can you provide especially this insurance service to all of my employees, and I'm going to pay you the premium. So here in this particular example, who is the recipient? ClearTex. Who is the supplier over here? The National Health Insurance Company. So in this particular case, the services has to be provided to the person who is registered, which is clear tax, because that person is going to pay me the premium. So in this particular case, your place of supply will become the location of clear tax. And let's say if clear tax is in Karnataka, then your place of supply will become Karnataka. And now let's say talk about another example. I'm a normal individual and I went to office and I said, can you please do the insurance for my parents? And they're like, okay, no problem, I can do. So in that particular case, since they are not even registered, so but for insurance, obviously this insurance company will always need an address. So they will always have they will ask for like Aadhaar card and everything, and they have address on record. So in that particular case, your place of supply will become the location of the recipient of services, which means to whom they are going to, for whom they are going to do this insurance. In the same way, if we talk about advertisement services to the central government, state government, statutory body or the local authority, in that particular case, this needs to be defined as per the contract or the agreement. So till now we have covered our section number 12, right? So till now what we have covered? We have covered section number 12, and section number 12 talks about your place of supply in case of services. And again, when we talk about services, which kind of services? Where you are both the supplier and the recipient is in India. So here we have divided this into this part. We have covered about immovable property. So if we just revise what exactly we have learned, अगर इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी हुआ तो प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई क्या होता है? जहाँ पे वो इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी सिचुएटेड है। और अगर वो इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी इंडिया के बाहर होती है तो उस पर्टिकुलर केस में तुम्हारा प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई जो होता है वो क्या हो जाता है? जो रिसिपिएंट जहाँ पे लोकेटेड है वो आपकी प्लेस बन जाती है प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई। दैट इज व्हाट वी हैव लर्न इन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी। फिर हमने पढ़ा इवेंट के बारे में। जब हम बात इवेंट की कर रहे थे तो हमने इवेंट को दो पार्ट में डिवाइड किया। वन इज एडमिशन एंड सेकेंड इज ऑर्गेनाइजिंग। हमने कहा अगर एडमिशन है, मतलब कि एंट्री टिकट की जब हम बात करते हैं तो प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई जो होता है जहाँ पे इवेंट हो रहा है वो बन जाता है मेरा प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई। और अगर मैं बात करती हूँ ऑर्गेनाइजिंग ऑफ एन इवेंट, तो ऑर्गेनाइजिंग ऑफ एन इवेंट के केस में जो मेरा प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई बनता है वो बनता है हाइब्रिड रूल के साथ। मतलब कि अगर मैं रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन को दे रही हूँ तो उसका लोकेशन, अगर अनरजिस्टर्ड को दे रही हूँ तो जहाँ पे वो इवेंट हो रहा है वो बन जाता है मेरा प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई। फिर हम गए थे ट्रांसपोर्टेशन रिलेटेड, जहां हमने अगेन तीन पार्ट में डिवाइड किया। ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ गुड्स, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ पैसेंजर एंड ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑन बोर्ड। अगर हम ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ गुड्स करें तो हमने हाइब्रिड रूल लगाया, मतलब कि अगर रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन को दे रहे हो तो उसका लोकेशन ले लो, अनरजिस्टर्ड को दे रहे हो तो जहां पे गुड्स हैंड ओवर करे गए हैं दैट बिकम्स माय प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई। अगर मैं फिर बात करी मैंने ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ पैसेंजर की, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ पैसेंजर में मैंने क्या कहा? अगर मैंने रजिस्टर्ड को दिया तो उसका लोकेशन, अनरजिस्टर्ड को दिया तो जहां से गुड ऑन बोर्ड हो रहे हैं दैट बिकम्स माय, सॉरी नॉट गुड्स, जहां से मैं ऑन बोर्ड हो रही हूँ दैट बिकम्स माय प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई। फिर तीसरा था ऑन कन्वेंस, तो जहां से चढ़ाया गया, जहां से सर्विसेज सॉरी जहां से वो चढ़ी है, जहां से फ्लाइट या मे बी ट्रेन जो भी चली है दैट बिकम्स माय प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई। उसके बाद हमने पढ़ा रेस्टोरेंट, केटरिंग, फिटनेस और हेल्थ रिलेटेड सर्विसेज। अगर ये सर्विसेज हमने ली है तो जहां पे वो परफॉर्म हो रही है वो बन जाता है मेरे प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई। जैसे अगर मैं मैकडी में जाती हूँ तो उनके लिए प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई क्या होगा? जो वो मैकडी वाले मेरे को बिल काट के देगा वो क्या करेगा? तो वो उसका सप्लायर ऑब्वियसली वो वही रजिस्टर्ड है और प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई भी क्या होगा? सेम प्लेस हो जाएंगे, तो वो हमेशा सीजीएसटी और एचजीएसटी ही चार्ज करता है। फिर नेक्स्ट हमने पढ़ा था ट्रेनिंग एंड अप्रेजल सर्विसेज। इसमें हमने हाइब्रिड रूल लगाया। मैंने क्या कहा? अगर मैं ट्रेनिंग जाती हूँ, मैंने क्लियर टेस्ट को जाके ट्रेनिंग दिया तो अगर वो रजिस्टर्ड है तो रजिस्टर्ड की लोकेशन, अगर अनरजिस्टर्ड हो जाता है तो उस पर्टिकुलर केस में जहाँ पे मैंने वो ट्रेनिंग दी है दैट बिकम्स माय प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई। फिर टेलीकम्युनिकेशन सर्विसेज मैंने क्या कहा था? अगर वो सर्किट्स वगैरह जहाँ पे इंस्टॉल्ड है वो हो जाएगा। पोस्टपेड कनेक्शन तो जो एड्रेस है वो होता है। प्रीपेड जहाँ मैंने पेमेंट करी वो बन जाता है। उसके बाद मेरा बैंकिंग सर्विसेज का था, तो जो भी अगर उनके पास मेरा लोकेशन रिसिपिएंट का है तो वो होगा, अगर नहीं है तो फिर उस पर्टिकुलर केस में क्या होता है? उसकी खुद की लोकेशन जो होती है वो प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई बन जाती है। और अगर इंश्योरेंस की बात करें तो इंश्योरेंस में अगेन अगर वो रजिस्टर्ड को दे रहा है तो वो एड्रेस, अगर वो अनरजिस्टर्ड को दे रहा है कि लोकेशन, तो क्या उसके पास रिसिपिएंट का एड्रेस है? अगर है तो हाँ वही बन जाएगा उसका प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई। तो अभी तक हमने ये सारी चीजें पढ़ी थी। अब now we'll move towards to place of supply of services outside India. इसका क्या मतलब हुआ? इसमें या तो सर्विस प्रोवाइडर या फिर सर्विस रिसिपिएंट, इन दोनों में से एक पार्टी क्या है, इंडिया के बाहर है, तो उस केस में हम बोलते हैं इसको प्लेस, उस केस में हमारा सेक्शन 13 एप्लीकेबल हो जाता है। तो ये याद रखना, जब हम कल भी इंपोर्ट और एक्सपोर्ट पढ़ रहे तो हमने क्या कहा था, कब 12 लगेगा कब 13 लगेगा, वो डिपेंडेंट है कि मेरा सर्विस प्रोवाइडर और सर्विस रिसिपिएंट कहाँ पे है। अगर सर्विस प्रोवाइडर और रिसिपिएंट दोनों दोनों के दोनों इंडिया में है तो मैं 12 को फॉलो करती हूँ, उनमें से अगर एक जना भी इंडिया के बाहर है तो मैं सेक्शन 13 को फॉलो करती हूँ। तो बिफोर हम सेक्शन 13 पढ़े, आई जस्ट वांट टू अंडरस्टैंड क्या इफ यू ऑल आर एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड अबाउट सेक्शन 12 या उसमें कोई भी डाउट है। अगर कोई भी डाउट है तो यू कैन पुट ऑन द चैट बॉक्स। I just got the reply from 2. One says clear, second says no doubt. What about others? Great. So everyone says it is clear. So now maybe we can just go to section 13. Though section 13 we can just like complete in a few minutes because we have already covered this section in the yesterday session when we were talking about the import and export. So most of the part you are already clear about, but still I will again repeat it for all of you so that you can remember ki what was the points we have discussed yesterday. And also since today we have discussed about section 12 and most of the section of 12 and 13 are related. The difference is in the 12 the service provider and the recipient both are in India, and here one of the parties outside India. So most of the time you will see that hybrid rule is not applicable at all. So now we can go with this. So if you look into the general clause over here, general rule if we talk about, it says the location of service recipient, and if it is not available then the location of supplier of services. That is what the general rule talk about. Again, we have just divided this into different parts. One is in relation to immovable property, then event, then location of supplier, then physical presence, the transportation related, and online information and database access and retrieval services. Basis this, we have just divided this session. If we talk about immovable property, again 12 mein to what we have done, we said what is the location of the property. Again in the same case, if you look into this also, it says the location or the intended location of immovable property will become your place of supply. Question comes in, what if my property is outside India? So in this case that will become only your place of supply. In the 12th section we have covered that in case the property is outside India, then the place of supply will become the place of the service recipient. But when we look into section 13, the particular that point which was there in 12, it is not over here, right? Then the next part is in relation to the events, and if we talk about events, again in this particular case what will happen for the events, there we have divided into two parts, admission or organizing. But when we look into this particular thing here, when we look into section number 13, again for both the admission as well the organizing, your location, the place of supply will always the place of supply where the event is organized. Right? So if we talk about the event, both for the admission or organizing, your place of supply will become the place where the event is actually held. Now, if we look into certain services where your place of supply will always be location of the supplier, this we have yesterday discussed. If we talk about the services which has been provided by the banking and the financial to the account holders, or if we talk about intermediary services, we gave the example of commission and all. So in that particular case, or there is a hiding mean of transport other than aircraft and the vessel up to the period of 1 month. Now let's say what happened. There was a foreigner and that foreigner visited India. They have hired a car and they say, okay, can you please show me entire Agra? I want to see Agra. So in this particular case, what should be the place of supply? The place of supply will be the place where the supplier is situated and not the recipient. Though recipient is coming from outside India, still your place of supply will be the place who is in Agra. So, but remember, if they have hired for up to 1 month, if they hire for more than 1 month, then your general provision will be applicable. Then the next is your performance-based services. So this also we have discussed yesterday. Either it's related to the goods or it is related to the person. If it is related to the goods, so wherever it is physically present. Again, for the person also, where we require the physical presence of the person with the supplier. So in that particular case, your place of supply will become where the services or the goods have been actually where the services have been actually performed. That will become your place of supply. Right? So this is about the performance-based services. So anyhow, we had discussed about this yesterday. We have also talked about two exceptions about these 2 points. Then we have talked about the destination of goods. In case of then we have talked about the transportation related services. And if we talk about the transportation related services, in that particular case, your place of supply will always be the destination of goods. And we talk about the transportation of passenger from wherever they embark, charte hain conveyance mein, that becomes your place of supply. And we talk about services on board a conveyance, the place of first scheduled departure will become your place of supply. Then if we talk about online information and database retrieval services, in that particular case, the place of supply will become the place of recipient if they have satisfied any of the 2 conditions from the 7 conditions which has been mentioned. And if we just talk about like a banking or the financial services, in that case, the location of recipient on record of the supplier. We talk about insurance, then the location of the recipient will become your place of supply. So now let's talk about, because one of the question we usually have is in relation to the online information and database. So here the thing is, if you look into this particular section, think about, let's say today I'm doing, I have to take Netflix services. When I want to take the Netflix services, that services is also kind of a online information and data retrieval services. So in this particular case, your place of supply will become the place where I am situated, recipient situated, if they have satisfied any of the 2 condition from the 7 condition. Which, and what are the 7 condition? One is address given by the recipient on the net, what I have given if it is in India. The card, the payment, because I'm going to do some payment. So from where I'm doing the payment. Then the billing address of the recipient, the IP address of the device used by the recipient, the bank account of the recipient used for payment, country code of the SIM card of the recipient in India, or fixed landline through which the services is received. So if any of the 2 from out of the 7 is in India, then in that particular case, your place of supply will become the location of the recipient of services. So this was about our section 13. Though section 13 I know I have run it, but most of the point, because yesterday in while we were discussing about import and export, we have covered that point. So hope your like this section is also clear. So with this, I would actually like to invite Mr. Venugopal Gela ji. So he's already here, and he will be covering the topic, especially the intricacies in input tax credit. So that is what he is going to cover. And from the introduction perspective, and I know that all of you know who is Venugopal. He is GST expert. He is, I will say, information technology expert also, because he is always known with his IT skill in the market. So here I will just introduce Venugopal sir.
Thank you, Surbhi. Surbhi, I have some questions for the participants. just to see how alert they were in attending your session. So here is question number 1. I am putting up on the poll. So I want users to give your views. Of course, this is what I would also want to take up in the ITC chapter, but before that, I would want to hear what is that your answer to it. So I am from Delhi. I booked a hotel in Mumbai, and this is for business purpose. Definitely, everything is business purpose. Only is eligible for credit. Supplier has levied CGST and SGST of Maharashtra. Is the credit eligible? Okay. So good. Most of the answers are coming to no. I would like to discuss during the ITC as why no also. But yes, there is one person standing out. There is one answer saying yes. Okay, very good. And I would like to also keep the session more interactive. Ask as many questions as you would like. Okay, there are some supporters to the loan person. There are 3 people saying yes, that credit is eligible. Yes, you should fight for the credit when it is for the business purpose. I would agree to it. All right. There's a second question coming up to you on section 12, and this question is on the place of supply relating to the immovable property. As Ruby was sharing, I was little free. I thought I'll just engage you with some questions. So I have created one more poll. So I am from Delhi. I am from Delhi, and I'm constructing a property in Nepal for a person situated in Delhi. So he wants a property in Nepal. So I am constructing a property in Nepal. So we also know place of supply with regards to the property is location of the property. So in this regard, what do you feel the place of supply would be, Nepal or Delhi? Okay, so poll is like closing, going close by. Initially, more were to Delhi. Now it is more to the Nepal. This is looking like a Sensex bar graph for me. So it is tending more towards Delhi and Nepal, and very mixed answers. I will also connect with you why I have asked this question, and the users are answering a little different, and answers. The bar graph is actually good to see the changing from one position to another position. Very good. And here comes the one more question, last question before I take up the thing. Right. So the third one, a travel agent in Delhi is organizing a tour. The tourist is in Delhi, also Delhi. The supplier is in Delhi, recipient is also in Delhi, and but the tour is being organized in Singapore. So the actual place of supply is happening in Singapore. Maybe kind of export transaction. So the question is, where should I refer? Should I refer to section 12 or section 13 of the Act? Because section 12 was domestic transaction, section 13 is international transaction. So should I refer to section 12 domestic transaction or section 13 international transaction? Okay, again here the graphs are moving a little close by. Very interesting to see participants giving their views. All right. 16 have answered. Very all are close. So it is 59 and 45%, for 49%. The earlier question was 45 and 55%. Good. Okay. So let me tell you the context for this poll. Amongst all chapters that are there in the GST Act, trust me, amongst all the chapters from your CGST Act to IGST Act, only one chapter which needs your constant attention and you might not be able to say just like this or from the back of your mind saying that, hey, look, this is the answer for this, is only place of supply. In fact, that's pretty tricky chapter, and for sometimes it becomes a place of supply as the location of supplier, sometimes location of recipient, sometimes place where actual services are provided, sometimes and strangely that it's a different place. And IGST has section 13 has a different provisions, section 12 has different provisions. So you definitely have to necessarily look into the contract, and more so the significance of the place of supply also has binding on input tax credit, and Surbi has done a pretty good job in taking the place of supply to the next level. Surbi, do we have slides for intricacies on the input tax credit? Can you put that up? Okay. All right. Okay, so let's get into the intricacies in the input tax credit, and let me just let's complete. Yeah. Okay. All right. So for looking at the intricacies in the input tax credit, the most of the session is now going to be very interactive, and you would only be looking at the questions and answers, because input tax credit is a known subject. We clearly know what the input tax credit is all about. Section 16, which gives you the primary source of the input tax credit, right? Now, first and foremost fundamental question which everyone asks is GSTR 2A ultimate? Is that what that defines my input tax credit? So I would like to hear from the members in the chat. What do you think? Is GSTR 2A ultimate, which defines your input tax credit? Is that what you think, that GSTR 2A, if a line item is there in 2A, your credit is safe. If it is not there, your credit is not safe. Is that what you feel? Okay, most of the users are saying no, that GSTR 2A is not the defining topic or the place for input tax credit. Pretty good. Now here comes the question to you. If you think that GSTR 2A is not the place, that yes, this is the only document I rely on for input tax credit. So the question comes up is, how will the officer say that section 16 of the input tax, section 16, which says that this the input tax credit which is applicable to you is a tax paid credit, how you as a recipient will prove that this is a tax paid credit? Now, one disclaimer: just because it is there in 2A, we are clear that the tax payment might have happened, might not have happened, because the 3B, yes, there is an officer who is proper officer attached to that supplier who will take care of it. But friends, trust me that I can see a big no from all of you or most of you saying that 2A is not the defining document which says the input tax credit is my ultimate. But I would like you to take a special attention to section 155. Whenever you are claiming an input tax credit, please note, whenever you are claiming an input tax credit, onus is on the recipient to prove that that credit is valid and genuine. Okay, so you got to make sure that the credit holds good. So how do you prove it is not there in 2A and you want to make a claim of input tax credit? Possibly, one possible scenario is the supplier has remitted the taxes and he has remitted under GSTR 1 table 7 as B2C. So given that he has remitted under B2C, you can obtain an indemnity letter from the supplier stating that I have made an error and time limit to correct the error has passed and I am unable to give you a credit via or report the credit via 2A and you are eligible. That could be a rescue or resort for you to claim the credit. So a plain answer to the question is you are not eligible to the credit in the eyes of the proper officer or assessing officer, but yes, you can make a claim to such credit through an alternative modes. Okay. Again, next question to the users. Now, we all know that rule 36 sub rule 4 got introduced with a credit of additional 10%, and the additional 10% cutoff limit for claiming the additional 10% has been given midnight of 11th or GSTR 1 due date. So now the question to you all is 2A is a dynamic document. 2A is a dynamic document. You will never know the credit till midnight, compensating for which GSTR 2B has come in, compensating which GSTR 2B has come in, which can give you the credit standing to the recipient at the midnight of 11th. So the question is, can you say that the GSTR 2B as a valid document in the eyes of law for the proper officer for claiming the credit? One point I would like to highlight, mention of GSTR 2B is nowhere there in the act, nowhere there in the notification, nowhere there in the rules. So 2B is not known legally in the act, rules, circular, notification. It is not known. Can a proper officer enforce and serve you a notice basis GSTR 2B? What is your answer? If you feel yes, please type it as yes. If you feel it is no, please type no. So is GSTR 2B a legal backing document for the proper officer? Pretty good. So I am seeing a mixed response, a yes and a no, yes and a no. Very good. And some of them were like a little confused and a big Z no. All right. Friends, if some of your questions are not answered, please, because in the poll it is going up, at the end, you should still definitely ask your question and I'm there to answer your question. The answers are no and yes. So eventually, what is the answer? The answer is an yes. Unfortunate, even though there is no legal backing for GSTR 2B. However, GSTR 2B is a carved out document of GSTR 2A, which means 2B will never have a value higher than or different from 2A, but 36 sub rule 4 says definitely says linking to GSTR 2A. Even the circular which has come, it has linking to GSTR 2A. But if you would want to make a claim of that, which is 2A is a dynamic document, the carved out document 2B is stopping the credits flowing into 2A at a particular date. The proper officer is only going to say that I have relied upon the credits in 2A and credits up to one point is there in your 2B. So that is going to be a valid document, and yes, you will be eligible for input tax credit based on 2B plus 10% only, and the officer is not going to allow beyond that. Now, follow-up question to that is, there are suppliers who are quarterly filers. So there are suppliers who are quarterly filers and they file their GSTR 1 once in a quarter. That means the credit would appear to me after 3 months. In the month 4, I am likely to see the value of that credit. In the month 4, I am likely to see the value of that credit. So the question to you is it right for me to ignore the quarterly suppliers and not take the credit? Added one more point to that. The quarterly supplier, when he filing his GSTR1, he is not going to change the date. Let's take the classic current quarter, July, August, September. Supplies which have been reported in the October GSTR1 by the quarterly filer, he is going to report the supplies for the month which he made to me in the month of July in his GSTR1 also in July. So GSTR 2A, if I download and I see the document date or the invoice line item date, will be July. Now, will the officer or do the officer has a right to stop me taking the credit in the month of July? And can he say, you cannot take that credit in July, you have to take the credit only in October? So the question to you is, for the proper officer, for the case where I'm just pausing here. Yeah. The proper officer, can he say that for the quarterly filers, do not take the credit for the month of July in July, and you can take the credit only in the month of October? What is your answer? Can he say credit for July cannot be taken in October? Yes, proper officer. Okay, so you feel the credit can be taken in July. Some says yes, the proper officer can say that credit cannot be taken. Now, by the way, this yes and no's are very tricky. Okay, so yes from the officer perspective, yes from the recipient perspective, and user who is typing yes, his version of yes would be something different. All right. So here, yeah, in fact, some of them are little detailed now. So no, in October only he'll be taking, and some user says no, credit can be taken in July, and some are saying yes, the officer can say yes, you cannot take it in July and you have to take in October. Friends, please note, if we are in the theory, taking the book and taking the rules, and we'll say yes, this is how it has to be. Just step out. When rubber meets the road, we know the speed of the car. When you go back to the client and say, all you are saying is fine, but you made the purchases, do not take the credit. Imagine the fate of such of the recipients. Already they have cash flow issues, and you are saying that this credit is not eligible, or you cannot take it now, you have to take it after 2 months. The working capital is choked. The 10% which is given in 36 sub rule 4 is not sufficient if most of my suppliers are under quarterly filers, because assuming I have 100 rupees input tax credit, of which 10 rupees is coming from quarterly filers and 90 is coming from 10 rupees is coming from monthly filers and 90 is coming from quarterly filers. In such a situation, how is it possible for you to comply with this additional 10% rule? You will only get 10 rupees plus 1 rupee, which is 11 rupees. Pretty difficult. But unfortunately, law is law. And there has been a lot of representations which have gone till we get an answer from the department or a circular from CBIC. We cannot ignore we cannot go by logic. We have to do a literal interpretation, and the credit for this transaction has to be taken only in October and not in July. This is again another unfortunate thing. Friends, next question on the input tax credits. Let's only look at the issues that are day to day that we are getting in the input tax credit. Let's look at a valid question which I always get. The mistakes which happen by the accountant, and error is human. The error that has happened is instead of taking the input tax credit under IGST, the input tax credit is not taken under IGST, but by mistake it has been taken under CGST and SGST. I am supposed to take a credit of 100 rupees, but I have taken a credit of 50 rupees CGST and 50 rupees SGST. I did not notice this error. Now we are doing the GSTR 9 for the financial year 18-19. Time limit to correct the error in 18-19 was September 19, passed away. In fact, 19-20, this month GSTR 3B is the last date. I'm sure people are looking at an opportunities to make corrections. Can the SSE ignore this mistake? He did not take more credit, he did not take less credit. He is supposed to take 100 rupees. He took 100 rupees. Instead of taking it in IGST, he has taken in CGST and SGST. Now, there is no option to rectify this. Can the SSE ignore this mistake and say that the credit which I am supposed to take is 100 I have taken? If you feel whatever SSE has done right, please type it as yes. If you feel whatever the SSE has done wrong, of course he has done wrong, but which is something which cannot be correct. If it is, this can be excused by the proper officer and it is okay in the law, please type it as yes. If you think no, this is not possible, please type it as no. Let's see what are the views. All right. Huge list of no's, big no's. No, it is not possible. All right, so again, all of you are saying no, it is happened to you, right? 100 rupees तो बहुत छोटा अमाउंट है, तो इसको भी इज लाइक ठीक है चलेगा. मान लीजिए 1 करोड़ का क्रेडिट है, 50 लाख आपने सीजीएसटी एंड 50 लाख एसजीएसटी ले लिया आपने, वो भी 2018 अप्रैल का है. 18 April to now, today we are almost like 2.5 years. ये पता चला GSTR 9 करते समय. Now, if all those who have said no, so the only alternative is whatever you have taken ineligible credit CGST, SGST, वो तो ineligible है. You have to pay it through DRC 03. चलो मैं पे कर दूंगा और आईजीएसटी में ले लूंगा. आईजीएसटी में लेने के लिए 16 सबसेक्शन 4 तो रोक दिया आपको कि जितने भी आपको करेक्शन करनी थी वो सितंबर 19 के अंदर करनी थी. ना तो मैंने करेक्ट किया, ना मेरे DRC 03 से पे किया. Will you now say that okay, it is wrong, I will now pay through DRC 03? So will your answer be still be the same? Ki the credit is wrong, you have to pay through DRC 03. So I want to hear from you people. I want to continue those no's. So I will want to put the question this way. Will you now pay the liability? Will you now pay the credit through DRC 03, 50 lakhs, 50 lakhs? What would be your answer? Would you pay the 50 lakhs now in the month of October 2020 pertaining to April 18 in DRC 03? Okay, so some says wait for SEN, some says yes, I will be paying, some are saying I don't know. जितने लोग भी yes I will pay ना, एक बार आप ओनर के पास जाके सर जी आप ये 50 लाख अभी पे करना है, and you will really get to know from your boss कि गलती पहली चीज एक गलती कर दी, उसके बाद मेरे पास आके बोल रहे हो और एक 50 लाख पे करना है, राइट? So someone is saying you lose the job जाने से वो ठीक है, उसके बाद उसके ऊपर क्या क्या इंक्रीमेंट वो कट जाएगा, वो भी is an issue. So friends, jokes apart, look at practically. Had it the credit be if I have taken in IGST, what will I do with the IGST credit? I will use it for IGST liability or CGST SGST liability. गलती से मैं IGST के बजाय I have taken as CGST and SGST. Yes, एरर हो गई है, गलती तो हो गई है, मैं मानता हूं कि एरर हो गई। इससे क्या नुकसान हुआ? I have still taken this credit towards payment of my CGST liability or SGST liability. In fact, IGST liability I could have used for offsetting SGST liability. Because of this mistake, I couldn't even use, assuming if there was some carryover of CGST or SGST, I am unable to now cross utilize between CGST and SGST. In fact, I am at loss by doing this error. And definitely there is no mistake, there is no revenue loss to the department. This is a worth case to fight it rather than the payment of. I would still agree with some of the users saying that no taxes, no, it has to be paid. Yes, legally it has to be paid, but please look into facts of the cases. Is there a loss to the revenue? In my personal view, it is definitely a bet case to win, and you could go ahead and argue this point. And one other thing, you can make a try on this. In your GSTR 9, your 6A will be showing as 0 IGST, 50 lakhs CGST and 50 lakhs SGST. Nothing would stop you to report in your 6B as 1 crore IGST, 0 SGST, 0 SGST. What will then happen? Your total input tax credit is still 1 crore what you are supposed to take and what you have taken. When you look at your 6J, 6J will be showing as 1 crore negative and 50 lakhs and 50 lakhs C plus as difference. But when you see the net line in your 6J, it would be matching. It would be an opportunity to venture out. The mistakes are happening and mistakes happen. So you can take the option of exploring this. Friends, next question. Okay, someone is saying that officer would not agree to our argument. That's a very valid statement, sir. That is his duty. वो अपना काम करेगा, and अगर जब वो नहीं मानेगा, all that he gives is one love letter, एक SCR आ जाएगी. हमारा क्या, like you go for an appeal, and of course you may lose in the first appeal because there's a commissioner who is sitting it, but that doesn't stop. You have there is a tribunal and there are other things. So till when we will definitely get an orders and which can take care of this, right? Okay, we will go to the next question on the input tax credit. Now, the time limit to avail input tax credit is September. We all know the time limit to avail the input tax credit is September. Now, while doing the GSTR 9, while filing my GSTR 9, I have realized that I have missed out some input tax credit. And by the way, do not quote me anywhere for this answer, but I'm just giving you a thought to think over it. And Surabhi definitely put me into a place where saying that take only intricacies related issues. So this is a typical issue. Let's take a simple example. My input tax credit in my books of accounts मान लीजिए 100 रुपए है, and GSTR 3 भी मैंने 80 रुपए लिया है. 20 रुपए क्या हुआ, भूल गया. क्योंकि पता नहीं है, भूल गया. There is like गलती से अकाउंटेंट ने GSTR 3B में एंटर नहीं किया है. Like it is not accounted in GSTR 3B. Now that it is not accounted in GSTR 3B, what can I do? Of course, till September you can take it. Now the accountant says that I don't know whether I have taken it or not. So you paid into the book GSTR 3B of next year till September. उसमें कुछ credits है, like up to 200 rupees. You are finding some credits. IGST, CGST, SGST, all those credits you are finding it. The accountant says that okay, you take the credit between April 19 to September 19. जो 20 rupees miss हो गया है वो यहाँ पे है. यहाँ इसे लेके आप कंसिडर कर लो कि मैंने क्रेडिट ले लिया है, and there is no credit which is lost. in your GST audit report, please do not report something as credit loss, or when it specifically comes to table 8, do not report anything in table 8E as some missed out credit. This is what the accountant's view is. Accountant do not want to lose the credit, and on a FIFO basis, he wants to adjust it into the subsequent year credits which have been taken. When I see in the books of accounts, there is nothing called carry forward to the subsequent period. So the accountant wants to report this in table 8C of GSTR 9 and table 13 of GSTR 9. And for those of you, if you do not remember those table numbers, basically this talks about the input tax credit of the current year is availed in the subsequent periods. So the question to you is, can an accountant use FIFO basis and consider all the missed out credits as if they have been availed in the next year? Please share your answer. So first friend saying no and a no and a yes. So this is, I should have actually put a poll for all these questions so that I could have easily seen like the graph moving like my heart rate up and down kind. But it's pretty interesting to see different views and different yes and a no. And there is absolutely no harm, no right answer, no wrong answer. Your yes is, of course, some are very affirmative and says like really not possible. Initially, yes were high. Now, no is tending to high. By the way, all my questions, no, very simple answers. Very simple answer. या तो yes है या तो no. बस उससे ज्यादा complicated questions मैं कभी पूछता नहीं. All right. So now, let me. अब इतना सुन रहे हो तो मेरा भी सुन लो. GSTR 3B is a consolidated credit register. If you say I have taken the credit, then you have taken the credit. If you say I have not taken the credit, then you have not taken the credit. That's all. There is no second thought to it. If you say I have not taken the credit, you have not taken the credit. You cannot take the credit. If you say no, I have taken the credit, वो जो अप्रैल में जो क्रेडिट दिख रहा था वो तो जो छूट गया था मार्च का वही क्रेडिट में अप्रैल में ले लिया हूं. अगर आप वो बोलते हो तो इसका मतलब है जो छूट गया क्रेडिट है वो अप्रैल में आपने ले लिया है. अब इसका क्या सबूत है? कुछ भी सबूत नहीं है, बिकॉज GSTR 3B जब आप अपलोड करते हो तो अंडरलाइंग डॉक्यूमेंट्स कुछ अपलोड नहीं कर रहे हो. अब ये अलग बात है जब GSTR 2B आ जाएगी एंड यूर क्रेडिट्स आर टोटली स्टार्टेड लिंकिंग एंड यू हैव टू एंश्योर दैट जो छूट गया है वो 10% से ज्यादा छूटना नहीं चाहिए. तब जब ताला लग गई है तो ताला लग गई है, तब तक you can still make a play for it, right? Okay, let's move to the next question. Let's come to these questions on the input tax credits eligible, ineligible from section 17 perspective. And the favorite questions whenever it comes to the section 17, most of the people have this question on the credits under 17 subsection 5, which are specifically blocked input tax credit. And let's take on, okay, by the way, I am making a little presumptions that all of you are aware of the sections and I'm not getting into the sections. Feel free to stop me, ask some questions on the chat if I'm talking about a section and you are not aware and you're a little confused. Okay, so the question here is on the COVID insurance which has been availed. Now, most of the companies have availed this COVID insurance. Now, this insurance is more like akin to life insurance and health insurance. Like we can see a lot of big companies, COVID Kavach, a lot of insurance policies have been floated. Now, this insurance has been availed. 17 subsection 5 B clause 1 specifically blocks input tax credit availed on life insurance or health insurance. The question to all of you is, given that this is a blocked credit, can someone avail an input tax credit of this? So please put an yes. If you think input tax credit is eligible, you put it as yes. If you think input tax credit is not eligible, put it as no. Let's see what are the views. So trust me, my questions are that simple. It is like choti si yes, choti si no. So just that people confuse हो जाते हैं कभी कभी yes डालूं या no डालूं. Okay. It's like I should have definitely actually put these questions as a poll, because I can see the yes and a no graph it just keeps changing just like that. Okay. Now let me give my views around it. Okay, so there is the point here is, if you look at 17 subsection 5 carefully, along with the provisos that have been provided, the provisos which have come is the insurance, when it is mandatory for someone to provide the insurance, when it is mandated by the law enforced to provide the insurance, sometimes it will be taken as eligible. But unfortunately, the period which has been notified for taking the insurance was there for a shorter period, and it is very difficult for you to prove that you have availed, because after that the Ministry of Labor Health have removed all the obligations they have put on employer, and saying that because even the employers were under distress, they were unable to pay salaries, so you know, what they can give, so there were no obligations made on employers that they should do this. Now, given that the obligations have been removed, in my personal view, the officer will not take cognizance of it, and he will say, yes, these credits would be disallowed and you will not be able to avail the input tax credit of it. Okay. Uh, uh, just want to talk to the Surbi if she is available. She can also participate in the discussion and share her views. Okay. Moving to the next question, again on 17 subsection 5, a blocked credits. Now, when it comes to the blocked credits, we know 17 subsection 5 clause C, clause D with respect to works contract, input tax credit is blocked. And works contract per se is a pretty complicated subject, and the only thing which comes outside the purview of the works contract is plant and machinery. Something that comes outside the purview of the works contract is plant and machinery. Just to give you a simple example, something for plant and machinery, but it has to necessarily be a plant and machinery. So I am using a machine, erecting it to the earth, and I am constructing a foundation to it. Input tax credit is definitely eligible. Now, something which is erected to earth, and because I need to have a wobble free operation, so the civil work that is related to that is also kind of eligible, and it has to be a plant and machinery. The question to everyone is on the lot of businesses have factory building. I have constructed a factory building, and this, when I'm saying a factory building, like it is operations and everything. Let's start with a simple question. Can I avail the input tax credit which is used for the course of constructing this factory building? Can the input tax credit for factory building be availed? Someone says if capital is not available, yes. As for though I'm not a standard accounting standard expert, but AS10 says that pays capital is. Okay, 2 users are saying yes. Okay, if you feel so, okay, that is something risky decision you have taken. Let me see if I can put the. Okay. Now, most of the users are saying no. And at this point, एक छोटी सी बात, India is democratic country and majority wins. अगर ज़्यादातर लोग no बोल रहे तो मैं भी no बोलना सोच रहा हूँ. So the answer is a clear no. But this is not a real question which I wanted to ask. The real question which I wanted to ask is फैक्ट्री बिल्डिंग के साथ साथ मैंने एक लिफ्ट डलवाई है. I have a lift which is put it in that building जो ग्राउंड फ्लोर से 5वीं फ्लोर तक मेरे को ले जाएगी. So the question is the lift which is purchased and erected to the building eligible for claiming input tax credit? So can I take the input tax credit on the lift which is permanently fastened to the earth and it is an immovable property? Can the okay, so the question has moved to the poll. So can we claim ITC on the lift erected to the building? Okay, so now the this is little interesting to see the graph which is going on. Yes, एक बार ज़्यादा जाएगी, no एक बार ज़्यादा जाएगी, and but again we are like reasonable. 59-41. ये 2020 मैच की तरह लास्ट मिनट तक कुछ भी हो सकता है. सो सडनली 4 पीपल नो डाल दिया तो ये आगे चली जाएगी. ठीक है. So now let's look at the thing. Most of the people are saying yes, you are eligible to take the credit. But unfortunately, there are certain advanced rulings that have come up which says that lift, once it is embedded to the immovable property, it becomes an immovable property and you are not eligible to take the input tax credit. Now, do I concur with the view? My answer is no, I wouldn't concur with the view, because the purpose of the lift is to ensure that you actually move from one place to other place. I would want to give you a small rider to it, a small disclaimer to it. We have pretty old judgments on what is an immovable property. To know what is an immovable property, you have to look at the purpose of annexation and the mode of annexation. In fact, when you put a lift to the building, is the value of the building appreciated? That is something which you have to see. Next, can this lift be moved as such and replaced at a different place? Is the second thing should be looked into. If there is an affirmative answers, like, okay, my value of the building is independent of the lift. Second, the lift can be replaced from this location to another location. It is not an immovable property and you are eligible for input tax credit. So this is what the authorities look at in terms of giving a credit that is eligible. Just a follow-up question with this to this is, okay, now the statement is, you are saying that the statement is here and there, it could be plus and minus. Let me take a case where something which I can remove and put it at a different place. Let us take that aspect. What is that? Shed. Today you can just go outside the cities. You will find bigger godowns, very big godowns, and those godowns you will find 10 फीट की दीवार रहेगी, कंक्रीट का दीवार रहेगी, उसके ऊपर 20 फीट की एमएस शीट्स लगाए हुए एक शेड दिखेगी. These MS sheets are perfectly removable, and it can be used as such in a different location. When I purchase those sheets and I am erecting or putting up that shed, can I take input tax credit on the temporarily posted sheds or using these iron sheets? Can I take input tax credit where these sheets are without even damaging or anything, because it is put on nuts and bolts? I can easily remove them and put it at a different place. Can I take input tax credit on it? You have the poll coming up. यस और नो के बीच में बहुत लड़ाई हो रही है आज. इनफैक्ट शायद आपने तक गई, एंड सुरभि इज डूइंग ए गुड जॉब फॉर मी, just for you to give an yes and no button clicking. So 63% of the people say yes, and 38% of the people say no. Okay. Unfortunately, contrary to my earlier statement on the lift, the answer to this statement for me is also a no. For a simple reason, again, to decide what is an immovable property, I have said the mode of annexation and purpose of annexation. I'm not putting the shed for the aesthetic look of the property. If the shed itself is not there, it might not become as an immovable property which I can rent it out to someone or which I can use it. बिना वो शेड का वो दीवार के लिए अगर वो नहीं होगा, तो आई कैन नॉट यूज दिस, दैट बिल्डिंग इटसेल्फ इज नॉट यूजेबल. The moment it becomes the building which is not usable, then this is part and parcel of that immovable property, and it becomes an immovable property, and the input tax credit is blocked. Now, yes, these are all litigative statements, and definitely it can be litigated in multiple things. Okay. Okay, next question. Again, friends, I'm only taking very nitty gritties, and during the GST audit, whatever you get it, the issues. The next question is on the goods lost, stolen, or damaged. Right? We all clearly know under 17, again, subsection 5, if there are some goods which have been lost, stolen, destroyed, written off by way of gift free samples under clause H, input tax credit is blocked. You cannot take the input tax credit. I am a manufacturer. Let's take I'm manufacturing these shirts. I get the cloth in bulk. I cut them in the pieces and stitch them, make the shirt. I am buying the cloth as such. During the course of stitching this shirt, during the course of stitching of this shirt, there is some cloth which gets lost, which is like I cannot use them. The goods gets lost. When lost, it is not theft, but it is a loss which happens. Now, should I reverse the input tax credit portion to of the raw material attributable to the material which I have lost during the production process? What is your answer? Should I reverse the input tax credit attributable to the goods raw material lost during the production process? Okay. Okay. Those who have said, put your answer in the chat. I request you to put it on the poll also. Some of you would have Yeah. All right. Okay. So most of you feel no, but some of you feel yes. But unfortunately, the officers who are going to come for assessment, they are also officers who are from excise, central excise background, and those officers are going to disallow and say, नहीं आप 4% जो भी कितना परसेंटेज आपका मटेरियल लॉस हो रहा है उतना प्रोपोर्शनेट इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट रिवर्स करना पड़ेगा. That is something which will be coming up with the officer. You can very well fight towards it. And in my personal view, input tax credit is definitely not a loss. Okay. Next question. Now, you have been served a notice for short payment of taxes, and the short payment of taxes is for reverse charge liability. आपने reverse charge liability पे नहीं किया. Okay. You have not paid a reverse charge liability, thinking that it is not applicable. Let me give you one more simple example for that reverse charge liability. We know government services are exempt. That is registration fee. The registration fee is exempt, right? आपने एक डिपार्टमेंट से रजिस्ट्रेशन जब भी लेंगे एंड रजिस्ट्रेशन फीस जब पे करेंगे उसके लिए टैक्स नहीं लगेगी. इट्स एन एग्जेम्प्टेड सर्विसेज. But when I renew the license, it is a litigative view. Pata nahi renewal will also be covered or not. So there are some advance rulings which said yes, and some said no. And aapko, there was some doubt whether you have to pay it or not. You did not pay tax on reverse charge for the license fees that is renewed. And when the license fee which is renewed, you did not pay the taxes. Government has served you a notice and they asked you to pay the tax along with the interest. You got the notice. Of course, it is not fraud. So you've been served the notice under section 73. You have paid a tax in response to their notice. Now, having paid the tax, can you avail input tax credit? For the sake of understanding, let us say that you have got the April 1819, you have got the notice in the month of say June 2019, well before September, so that your question on September ka bhi rahega. So the notice, the tax reverse charge liability paid under section 73, am I eligible to take input tax credit? Okay, there are a couple of no's and yes, and so I should say thanks to the organizers and sorry because these questions I have not compiled and given to them earlier, but they are handling the questions in time. Okay, so some of you are saying yes, some of you are saying no. So I would like to draw the attention to two sections wherein you will be paying the taxes. Those two sections are 73 and 74. The demand for the payment of taxes that happens. And whenever there is a demand for payment of taxes are happening under these sections, your 17 subsection 5 which blocks the credit, it only blocks the credit for the taxes which is paid for section 74. If the tax is paid for section 73, it doesn't block the credit. So I want to draw the reason why I have brought this up is whenever a notice comes, the officer, in his view, he feels that you have done the fraud and he will serve the notice under section 74. In my personal view, you got to contest that notice and say that this notice cannot be issued under section 74 and it has to be issued under section 73, and you have all the rights to file an appeal against that notice, saying that if in his view there is something is there, of course the onus of proving that it is a genuine transaction is on you. And if you have paid the taxes under section 73, you are very much eligible to claim the input tax credit. If you have paid the taxes under section 74, you are not eligible to take the input tax credit, right? Okay, now come to the earlier question. There was a question that came up is on the loss of production. Now there are two types of loss, normal loss and abnormal loss. Normal loss is part of business and input tax credit is allowed. But an abnormal loss, you have to consider if this abnormal loss is curable or incurable. A question which came up in the chat is on ice creams. I'm a manufacturer of ice cream. I manufactured the ice cream and suddenly power got shut and all my candies, the solid state became a liquid state. Now the material ingredients, the cream or the chemicals that I have used in the course of essence, the food colors, all that, the input tax credit is lost. Again, in my view, answer is no, because it is something which is reusable and you can come up. But if it is some normal to the business inherent to whole of the process, it is included in your business. In your business costing, you will include this. That's something which cannot be included in the costing, and suddenly you have lost the goods in the form of theft, or you have lost and that loss is not irrecoverable. Then the question of reversal of input tax credit comes up. Okay. Then we are moving to the last part of the discussion of section 17 is on the credit which I avail as a composition to the regular. Whenever there is a switch from the composition scheme to the regular scheme, under section 18, I have given an option to avail input tax credit. Now, as a composition dealer, I have not been availing the input tax credit, and I have moved from composition to the regular scheme. The moment I move from composition to the regular scheme, I am eligible to take input tax credit. Now, the question is, for me to take the input tax credit, I should file form ITC-01. The point is, I forgot to do that. I have forgot to do that activity. I have taken my credit in my regular GSTR 3B. It could be a situation where I have applied for registration. During the course of obtaining the registration, I have purchased some goods, and I should again file the necessary form to avail the input tax credit on the closing date. It includes someone who is not liable to be registered. The stock which he is holding on the date of registration, he can carry forward that. Now, he has done the necessary documentation, but for some reasons, the form is not filed. I have taken the credit in GSTR 3B. Can the input tax credit be denied, or I have all the workings with me? I have the purchase bill, I have the closing stock, I have CA certified statement. Can that input tax credit which is availed in GSTR 3B be deniable from the officer? Can the officer say this input tax credit is not eligible? What do you feel? If you are tired of answering yes and no, don't worry, this is the last question. So all right, yeah. Most of you are right. Yes, if you do not follow the procedure which is given in the law, the credit which is eligible for you is denied. And we have seen this in the case of trans return. Whenever the trans returns are not filed, the officer have not allowed the input tax credit to the users, and users are actually losing the input tax credit. So friends, these are the various intricacies between section 16, 17 and 18 in the input tax credit read with GSTR 9. If you have any further questions, we will take up the questions by way of chat during the Q&A. But I would like to, I was asked to talk about one topic called TCS, which has come up. And this is something which is new. I think yesterday many of you have asked the question to explain a little bit about TCS, though it is such a simple thing, but let me explain you the complications which is in it. But let us just begin the what is TCS. Now, TDS is the tax deducted at source. Whenever I'm making a payment to someone, I am at the receiver, I have buyer, I have bought something and I have to pay. So I have an obligation to withhold some taxes while I'm making the payment and make the payment. Right? Now, contrary to that, TCS is on the sales. While I'm making the sales, I am expected to collect something from the borrower and remit it to the, not the borrower, from the buyer, and remit it to the government. What is the purpose of TCS? If you look at the history of the TCS was introduced in the areas where I cannot trace the buyer, or buyers are in unorganized sector. Whatever is the likely profit the buyers would make into the applicable tax rate that would happen, let that portion of it, let us collect it by way of TCS, was the thought process of the government. Generally, it was done whenever a scrap was getting sold, or some forest related produce and other things were that was a thing which was covered in TCS. Now, what is the new TCS which has come under 206 C1H? Now here they have said, wherever the aggregate value of the sales, if it is exceeding 50 lakhs in any of the previous year, they are now wanting to bring a TCS. Let me give you with the illustration. And the amount of TCS that needs to be charged is 1% in case if the other is not there. Otherwise, if it is only 0.1%. But again, owing to the COVID, we have the 25% discount in the TCS rate. So the rate has become now 0.075%. Rate is simple, but the complications are how to handle it. Now, is it a retrospective or retroactive? Firstly, this is not a retrospective, it is retroactive. How or what does it mean? To whom it is applicable? It is applicable only those SSCs whose turnover is more than 10 crores. अगर मेरा टर्नओवर पिछले साल में 10 करोड़ के ऊपर है, तभी ये प्रोविजन मेरे को एप्लीकेबल होगा. अगर मेरा 10 करोड़ के नीचे है, ये प्रोविजन एप्लीकेबल नहीं होगा. चलो, मेरा टर्नओवर 10 करोड़ के ऊपर है, इसका मतलब हर एक सेल पे मेरे को कलेक्ट करना है? आंसर इज नो. If the sale consideration during the year is more than 50 lakhs, then you have to collect. If the sale consideration is less than 50 lakh, you need not collect. And along with that, they have given exemption to embassy, central government, local authority and other notified persons. उन लोगों को हटाया दिया गया. राइट? तो आपका टर्नओवर पिछले साल में 10 करोड़ से ज्यादा है, एंड जो मटेरियल आप बेच रहे हो, एंड द बायर is paying you more than 50 lakhs, not in one bill, in all the bills together, then you have to do the TCS. Okay. Now the question is, from when do I count 50 lakhs? You have to count this 50 lakhs from 1st April. Please note, you have to count this 50 lakhs from 1st April. Why 1st April? Because it used the word previous year. Okay, मान लेते 50 लाख में 1st April से काउंट करता हूं. अगर मेरा April to September, okay, from what date it is effective? It is effective from 1st October. मान लीजिए मेरा टर्नओवर April to September to a customer already crossed 50 lakhs. मैंने उसको अब तक 1 करोड़ का माल बेचा हूं. तो मैं 50 लाख के ऊपर जो भी बेचा हूं, उसके लिए do I need to do the TCS? The answer is no. It is not a retrospective. So how do I do it? You take it whatever which you have sold before 1st April also, and to use who are the people who are fitting under eligible category. अगर जो भी एसएससी 50 लाख के ऊपर क्रॉस हो रहा है, ओनली दे विल बिकम एलिजिबल कैटेगरी. मेरा कस्टमर का टर्नओवर था 40 lakhs बिफोर सितंबर. अक्टूबर महीने में मैं 5 लाख बेच रहा हूँ. शुड आई डू टीसीएस? नो. बट आई एम डूइंग एन इनवॉइस वैल्यू ऑफ 15 lakhs. शुड आई डू टीसीएस? आंसर इज yes, you should do TCS. Okay, some of the examples. The consideration received is 60 lakhs. Then the tax is required to be collected only on the 10 lakhs over and above 50 lakhs. So it is not on the full value, it is over and above. Next, the seller whose turnover is 12 crores in the previous financial year, and he is giving us the following data to a particular buyer. Sales which is made in 2021 is 40 lakhs, 21-22 is 20 lakhs, and 22-23 is nil. But he has received the amount as an advance. So is the TCS required? Firstly, for the year 1 and year 2, the 50 lakhs limit is per year not required. But in year 3, he has received some advance. So he has received 60 lakhs advance. So 10 lakh ke upar he has to do the TCS. What is the amount he has to do? Yes, the amount here, the TCS he has to do is 0.1% of the sale consideration. And when he has to pay at the time of receipt of such amount. So the question which generally most of the users always ask me is, okay, if it is at the time of receipt, then in the invoice, is it right to put TCS amount in the invoice? Now, the another contrary thing people also get it, अगर मैं invoice में डाल दिया तो government बोलेगा आपने collect कर दिया, pay कर दो. The another view that comes is, अगर मैंने pay कर दिया, गलती से customer ने ये माल वापस कर दिया and बोला कि मेरे को नहीं चाहिए, या it became a bad debt, मैं अपना मटेरियल भी खो दिया हूँ, उसके ऊपर साथ 0.1% जो गवर्नमेंट को पे कर दिया हूँ, ए क्रेडिट टू हिम, वो भी मैंने खो दिया हूँ. सो बेटर लेट मी नॉट शो इन द इनवॉइस. चलो मैं इनवॉइस में दिखाया नहीं हूँ. नाउ हाउ विल द बायर नो कि उसको 0.1 एक्स्ट्रा पे करना है? तो मैं बोलता हूँ उसको डेबिट नोट भेज दूंगा. द थिंग इज, ओके, हाउ डू यू कंट्रोल इट? द थिंग, so you have to find an accounting mechanism to handle this. What is the accounting mechanism we do to handle this? The accounting mechanism we can do to handle it, record this as TDS collectible as the 0.1%, and of course now owing to COVID you have the 25% discount, and record this as the TDS collectible. As and when the customer is making the payment including the TCS, move from, is like if I have to take a simple entry, if my sales rupees is 100, and let us say, just for the sake of the understanding, TCS as 1 rupee, and I'll leave about all other the transactions. Debit customer with 101, credit sales with 100, credit TCS collectible with 1 rupee. Whenever the customer is paying, some, मान लीजिए customer ने आपको 50 रुपए पे किया, so from you give a credit to the customer 50, the customer account slowly gets nullified. From this TCS collectible, you move the 50 paise from this ledger to TCS payable, so that you know in that month you have to pay it to the government. And whatever be the accounting software, you can use the underlying line items or the bill references, whatever you are using, the TAN number or the PAN number of the person, so that while filing your returns you have some correlation. किसके लिए हमने ये TCS पे कर रहे हैं end of the month, you can use some control and do it. In the earlier exam जो 60 lakhs advance आया था, is the TCS applicable on the advance? Yes, the TCS is applicable even if the advance is received. Now, is TCS applicable for all goods and services? Again, the TCS is applicable only for goods and not for services. So friends, this is the questions which some discussion points which came up on the TCS. And since there was a question which asked by the many of the members yesterday on TCS, so I thought it is right that we should have some discussion on the TCS. Okay. So any questions, any other questions, members? Now we are open to take up the questions on the topic place of supply, on the topic whatever which has been covered by the earlier speakers. Of course, they have done pretty good job and everything is there. But if you still have any doubts, we are open for questions. And with us, we also have Surabhi. Okay, she can definitely help you some answers to those questions.
So all of you can like comment on the chat box.
Ah. See, I have made your life easy giving you questions yes or no. You also ask me some question with my answer should be yes or no.
So I think there is one question in relation to TCS.
Yeah. So under which stand TCS shall be paid in case collection branch and billing branch is different? Very good question, sir. There are on-ground practical questions. In fact, some of them we might also have not explored. And this would be a classic case of banks. Okay, the banks do not sell goods, but the banks, each bank they generally register themselves with a separate TAN. Likewise, lot of big corporates they set up outlets across India. Each outlet will have their own registration to do compliances of their own. Now, how do I look at the provision of this 50 lakhs, provision of 10 crores? Should I look it at entity wise, or should I look it at the person wise? Now, whenever the provisions of TDS and TCS has to be looked at, the moment you are holding a separate TAN account, you are a separate TAN person. So the person, just to answer the question, the person who is applicable to this is the TAN holder who is responsible for his operations. He is going to look at it. Now, the most of the situations the corporates have a single bank account for the purpose of banking. Now, can I consider that since there is a single bank account, that can I delink both and say it is applicable for the all? Answer is again no. You got to think even if the money is received in the parent or billing branch or somewhere, it is deemed that you have also received TCS and you have to pay the TCS for it. Okay. A registered person is not allowed to take ITC if the supplier has not filed the returns for the year, even after the due date of filing for September in the following year. What would be the consequences of 16 subsection 4? Registered person is not allowed to take the ITC if the supplier has not filed the returns for the year, even after. Sir, again, yes, you have to take the. There could be a situation where the registered person would have filed after the September. So 2A might not be a conclusive document for you to claim the credit as on that date. But by the time your assessments are happening, if you are the registered person is filing the returns, it is well and good. Otherwise, you can make sure you have an indemnity with you. If I pay RCM tax under wrong head like CGST, SGST instead of IGST, I will rectify in GSTR 9 how to claim this if the ITC paid by DRC 03. Sir, the question is very tricky thing when it comes to RCM. आरसीएम का हमेशा ये कंफ्यूजन रहता है कि आरसीएम मैंने C+S में पे करना है या आईजीएसटी में पे करना है. अगर ट्रांसपोर्ट का केस ले लेते हैं, मैंने एक ट्रक हायर किए थे, हरियाणा से माल दिल्ली आ रही है एंड दिल्ली आने के बाद मैंने जीटीए को कुछ पैसा पे किया था. अभी माइंड में ये डाउट है कि CGST लगाऊं, SGST लगाऊं एंड प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई का क्वेश्चन तो आई एम श्योर इफ आई आस्क यू व्हाट इज द प्लेस ऑफ सप्लाई फॉर गुड्स ट्रांसपोर्टेशन देन इमीडिएटली आप बोलोगे कि सुरभि मैडम थोड़ा आंसर कर दीजिए, क्योंकि सप्लायर इज इन हरियाणा, रेसिपिएंट इज इन दिल्ली नाउ शुड आई कंसिडर ऑरिजिन, और ये कंफ्यूजन में आपको पे करना था, आपने कर दिया, ठीक है, 18% IGST पे कर दिया, बाद में पता चला वो CGST SGST। तो द क्वेश्चन इज अभी करूं क्या? इफ यू हैव एन अपॉर्चुनिटी टू करेक्ट इट, प्लीज प्ले CGST एंड SGST एंड टेक द इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट। वो 2 बार कर दिया, 2 बार क्रेडिट लूंगा तो ऑफिस से डिसअलाउ कर सकता है, शायद कर सकता है। दिस आर ऑल लिटिगेटिव थिंग्स, देयर आर नो डेफिनेटिव आंसर। मैंने किया नहीं, कैन आई, इज इट ओके? इवन फॉर दैट आंसर शुड बी ओके, you have good chances of winning the case. Okay. Do we have to check the threshold of 50 lakhs for TCS calculation for previous financial year 1920 or from 1st April September 2020? If from the buyer to which you are supplying, you have to take only for the current year transaction. The only unfortunate thing or the mischief that comes in is it is sale value or receipt. अगर मेरा पिछले साल का जो सेल इस साल में आ रही है, इस साल में मेरा सेल कुछ भी नहीं है, अगर पैसा आ रहा है एंड वो 50 लाख के ऊपर जा रहा है, this TCS section will come in and it will again create confusion. We are not taking input on bank charges. Is it okay? So I'll put it in a different way. You are going to a marriage party and खाना मिल रहा है, अगर आप नहीं खा रहे हो तो आपकी मर्जी है, अगर खाना है तो वो भी खा सकते हो। सो बैंक चार्जेस में कोई ये नहीं बोला कि बैंक चार्जेस में क्रेडिट मत लो, अगर लेना आप लेना चाहता है तो डेफिनेटली ओके, अगर नहीं लिया एंड मैनेजमेंट इज ओके विथ इट आल्सो इज लाइक ओके, बट इट इज एन एलिजिबल इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट इनपुट सर्विसेज। Then can we claim transitional credit by way of refund? Sir, refund, input tax credit refund की question में this is transitional credit, एक advance ruling में very tricky situation आ गई थी। Technically, transitional credit is not an input tax credit. What you are eligible for refund is input tax credit. As per the law, input tax credit मतलब it has to pass through section 16. Since it is not an input tax credit, you cannot claim a refund. But however, in case of exports, you can utilize, because by way of transition provisions, it came into your electronic credit ledger and you can use this credit for offsetting your liability. Okay, a question to Surabhi. Where is the place of supply of this session? Venugopal is sitting in Bangalore, Surabhi is sitting in Delhi, मैं नोएडा में बैठ के सुन रहा हूँ। एंड सर एक क्वेश्चन, आपने क्लियर टैक्स को पे किया क्या इस सेशन के लिए? Take the input tax.
Okay, so see, if we just talk about this, obviously ये section 12, अगर हम बात करते तो section 12 में आ जाएगा, 13 में तो आएगा नहीं। Now talking about कि क्या होगा, so see, if this is a training, because this is kind of a training and appraisal services, so it will covered under the training and appraisal services, and we know कि उसमें we have to always see कि is it provided to a registered person or the unregistered person. So now it also depends on कि जब आप लोगों ने पे किया था, whether you have like added your GST number over there or not. तो in case किया है, वहाँ पे सब कुछ डिटेल मांगी गई थी, then that will be your place wherever you are registered. But in case if it is not provided, and most of the cases we have seen is it is not provided at all, and if you have not even provided your location, अगर अपना लोकेशन बताया था तो इट वी कैन टॉक अबाउट कि रिसिपेंट क्या, बट वो नहीं होता है। तो यहाँ पे द सप्लायर का लोकेशन, सो वेयर एवर क्लियर टैक्स इज लोकेटेड, क्योंकि दिस इज द सर्विस प्रोवाइड बाय क्लियर टैक्स, so wherever clear tax is located, that will become your place of supply. So यहाँ पे clear tax is located in Karnataka, so Karnataka will becomes your place of supply.
Right. Next, if the party has made 49 lakh sales, TCS का question है, and till 30th September on his October bill 2 lakhs, does the TCS will be applied on 1 lakh? Yes, it is over and above 50 lakhs, it would be applied on that. Seller issued invoice and buyers accordingly claimed ITC in April 18. Buyer paid 50% payment till now. Is the ITC allowable? अगर आपने 50% पे किया तो 50% is eligible. सो अगर आपका जितना आपने पे किया उतना तक आप आईटीसी ले सकते हो, जितना आपने पे नहीं किया उतना तक आपको डिस्कनेक्ट हो जाएगा. एंड जस्ट टू पुट इट ऑन अ लाइटर नोट, एंड इफ यू आर सीइंग, इफ यू आर वाचिंग मूवीज लेट नाइट एंड योर सब्सक्रिप्शन इज एंडिंग मिडनाइट, तो आधी मूवी में आपका सब्सक्रिप्शन कट हो गया, चैनल बंद हो जाएगी. लाइकवाइज आपने आधा परसेंट पे किया, आधा परसेंट क्रेडिट ले लो, बाकी आधा परसेंट जब आप पे करोगे तभी यू कैन रिज्यूम योर सर्विसेज. How to respond to notices by the department? Pretty simple. एक वर्ड फाइल ओपन कर दीजिए, एंड जो आपको सही लगता है, एंड ओके, आई एम नॉट रियली जोकिंग, लेट मी टेल यू हॉनेस्ट, वी डू प्रैक्टिस इन द लिटिगेशन थिंग. You got to be very very clear articulating in your facts of the case, your understanding. You should not resort to any case laws or advanced ruling. You should not venture into them at the beginning of the reply, because in your view what you are feeling right about the law is what you are putting the case. Because there would be a very thin line of difference between the facts of the case of that and yours, and definitely this would be taken as a basis as we go up the ladder. But you have to restrain yourself in referring to the cases at the first level, and you have to find the merits of the case within the four corners of the sections act, which is given there in the act, rules, and the notification. What comes your biggest rescue is circulars. What are the circulars which have been issued by the board are binding on the officers? You can definitely quote the circulars and reply to the notices. Do not miss out replying to the notices. If you have been served a notice, please reply to them. Reply to them in timely manner. Please remember the due dates for appeal. Most of the times it is 90 days. If you have something to appeal, you can always go for an appeal. Condemnation of delay is like you have to have a valid grounds for condoning the delay, and that's also again 30 days. In respect of ITC claimed mistakenly, reversed it without utilizing it. What about ITC claimed mistakenly but not utilized? Should we reverse it, or reverse it as it is, or with interest? Sir, in GST or 3B, while you are filing the returns, your system will automatically take the input tax credit. अगर आप बोलते हो कि नहीं नहीं, मैंने 1 लाख के बजाय बीच में डॉट छूट गई थी, मैंने 1 करोड़ की क्रेडिट ले ली. If you have taken credit for 1 crore and you have not utilized it, and next month you are reversing it, in my personal view, there is no question of interest because you have not utilized it. Section 50 is only top 50 subsection 1 talks about credit with respect to the liability and not input tax credit, because only when you use the input tax credit you have the liability that would come up. But you did not notice, and officer has noticed, and the officer is serving the notice under section 73. Officer has powers under section 73 to levy interest even for the credit availed but not utilized. He can levy with the interest. And we have got a notice for it. How to respond it? Yes, this was my answer. You got the notice, and under section 73, officer has the powers to include interest on the credit availed. So please respond accordingly. I think we have answered all the questions. Fire loss, capital loss reversed within how many days? जब लॉस हुआ तब you have to reverse the credits, and the more you delay, you will have to pay along with the interest. By the way, the chapter 5 which talks on the input tax credit, chapter 5 also draws some powers on the interest, like rule 42, 43. Whenever the interest is payable, it quotes that interest is payable as per section 50 subsection 1, the rate which is mentioned. So the liability to pay the interest is not only residing in section 50 but also residing in chapter 5 also. Okay, could you please explain the Mumbai wala, Mumbai में आके जो रहा था, उसका क्रेडिट ले सकूं या नो? अनफॉर्चुनेटली सर, द आंसर इज नो. If the place of supply is not equivalent to location of recipient, if POS is not LOR, then the credit is denied. तो अब आप पूछोगे ये क्यों? ये तो एक्ट में कहीं लिखा नहीं है. यस, एक्ट में लिखा नहीं है. You may think there is only one CGST Act, one IGST Act. So at least CGST or IGST का तो मिलना है. But unfortunately, there is no one CGST Act. You should know there is no one CGST Act. As many SGST Acts are there, so many CGST Acts are there. अगर एक ही CGST Act होता, if you have taken a registration in the state of Delhi, you need not take a CGST registration in the state of Maharashtra. आप वही CGST नंबर जो दिल्ली का है, आप बोल सकते हो CGST मेरा एक ही रहेगा, बट SGST हर एक स्टेट में रहेगा. नो, because when you refer to the section 22 in the CGST Act or equivalent SGST Act, it clearly says you take registration in each of the state wherever it is applicable. So this act extends to all the states. The moment place of supply is in a different state, the credit actually attributes to the distinct person who would have been there in that state, and that is how the interpretation of the law. Where is it written? Kahin written nahi hai, but it will come out eventually with the courts. But as of now, input tax credit is not allowed where the place of supply is of not of location of recipient. A sale of fixed asset liable to tax, 100% liable to tax at what rate? Whatever is the original rate of mission. मैंने वो फिक्स्ड एसेट्स में इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट नहीं लिया, फिर भी लायबल है. आंसर इज यस, यू आर एलिजिबल टू टेक, यू डिड नॉट टेक, बट it doesn't bar the government to levy tax on you. Okay, it got depreciated. Can I put the tax only on the WDV? Answer is no. You have to put it on the sale value, not on the WDV, even though you have not availed the input tax credit. The leeway is given only for the cars, used vehicles, which is cars. Only for the used vehicles you can take the input tax credit on the margin value, or the, if you're making a profit, only on the profit on sale of the car you have to pay the tax. And at what rate? For the only the cars, it is at 12%. If it is less than 1200 cc, if it's a sports cars or more than 1200 cc, it is 18%. All right, we have come to end of the discussion, and over to you, Surbi, if you have to add something.
Yeah, I think hope all of your queries has been answered, and I will say thank you to the Venu sir who has made this session so interactive, and also made it so easy for everyone to understand. In fact, we got one feedback for one of the person Rao who clearly says Venu sir always explain in a good way. So that's the always thing, whenever Vedu
Thank
sir
you.
explained, it's always we can always understand it very easily, and also it is always interactive, so that we never get bored with the session. So I would say thank you Venu sir, and with this we'll end our session.
Thank you.
In case you have any query or anything, you can always reach out to us at support@cleartext.in. So, and also I know that many of the people have a lot of question in respect of PPT and other things. So this PPT will be shared with all of you on Monday. So by Monday you will be getting the PPT on your registered mail ID. Thank you very much.
Thank you.